Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brabert. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and oh my goodness, do we have a big show for you guys today. We are going to preview in depth every single NFL divisional round matchup, and at the end of the show, we also have to talk about some very big news, Logan, that I know everybody is eager to hear your thoughts on, although you did already talk about this on TikTok, but more fleshed out. We got to talk about Mike Tomlin stepping down as the Steelers head coach after almost 2 decades. We'll get to that at the end of the show after we preview these games, but just for now, real quick, give me one word on the Tomlin situation.
One word.
Well, already too many.
Relief.
I thought it might be relief. And here he goes with more words.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. I think relief is the...
Yeah, it's a good choice.
I'm shocked would be another one. I didn't think that the Steelers were this...
words.
I didn't think,
full sentence.
I didn't think the Steelers were this in tune with the base.
Multiple sentences, arguably a paragraph, so that's just a clear violation of the instructions.
Well, I don't know
you
if
can
you
give
saw,
your paragraphs later, man.
I don't know
that's
if you
what the
saw,
segment's
man.
for.
College students are incapable of writing paragraphs now. If they have to write 6 of them, it's like their minds might explode.
What's that?
You
What
know?
the fucking woke media is telling you? What's that?
No, it's
woke media headline you read?
No, dude, I saw that these college students are so dependent on using they're so dependent on using ChatGPT that they can't think anymore. But they also refer to him as Chat, like he's their friend.
Yeah, I got a couple
They're
buddies
like,
who do that.
I consulted Chat, and I go, who?
Yeah. I got a couple buddies who are maybe a little too close to Chat. And Logan, I know that you've actually had a pretty intense romantic relationship with ChatGPT for a while now. So I don't know that you should be throwing stones from that glass house of yours. Let's talk about the football, though. And let's start, Logan, with the first game on the slate. We'll just go in chronological order here. Bills-Broncos. Does it get any better than this, Logan? Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills against the Boner and the Broncos. This is going to shock everybody. I've got a lot to say about this game, but I will let you take the lead here, Logan. And let's start with the Bo Nix matchup against this Bills defense. How key is that, and how do you see that matchup faring in this game?
To state the obvious, I think a lot of this is going to be dependent on the injuries for the Buffalo Bills defense. They have a pretty laundry list injury report coming into this game. I will say I expect most of these guys to play. One, the Bills are tough as nails, but two, they realize the stakes of this situation and how important this is. Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano, Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, those guys are all listed as questionable. They are likely to play, and then the likes of Ed Oliver. Ed Oliver is rumored to potentially maybe return in this playoff matchup or a little bit later down the line. And then guys like Max Hairston and Jordan Poyer are a little less likely. They're probably going to be out for this game. That being said, that's a big question. Can this Denver offense win in spite of Bo Nix? This year he's been clutch. He has led, I think, a NFL leading 7 game-winning drives this season. But you have to remember a lot of that is due to the fact that Denver rarely convincingly beats anyone. It's a double-edged sword, right? And you also have to harken back just 1 year ago when a lot of people said that the Broncos were going to knock the Bills' block off, and then they got demolished 31-7, and they got outgained by nearly 250 yards. Not a lot's changed about this Bills defense. They've brought in some familiar faces from, maybe a few years ago, but not a lot has changed, and this may come as a surprise. I'm just not all that high on the Boner, man. I'm not super optimistic that I think this Denver offense has improved. I like the running backs a little bit more than the guys they had last year. I still think Sean Payton is brilliant. I think the offensive line is among the best in the league. But I still think Bo Nix is one of the most limited quarterbacks in football. And so I don't have a lot of confidence considering the output and the results that we got from him last year. I'm not all that confident that we're in for a Bo Nix masterclass or anything like that. I think if the Broncos are going to win this game, it is going to be a very similar formula to the way the Broncos have won a lot of games this year. And that is, it is close down to the wire. It's like 17-17. They're trailing 2017, something like that. Their defense can keep it close enough. And then right at the end, the boner comes through in the clutch. But I think it is going to be – I don't think it's going to be a game to really write home about for Bo again. I think this Denver defense is going to likely have to win in spite of Bo.
I like this matchup for the Bills a fair bit more than I did the Jags game. I viewed that one as almost a toss-up. I would have put my confidence level at like 55% for the Bills. I picked them to win that game, but I said the Jags were the scariest opponent in the AFC for the Bills. I would say I am a fair bit more confident going into this one, not just because I think the Jags by the end of the year were a better football team than Denver, but also because of some of these key matchups that I think favor Buffalo more against Denver. And the first reason really is that Bo Nix is the exact sort of quarterback who tends to really struggle against Sean McDermott defenses. A young quarterback who isn't a strong processor, who can be confused by some really well-disguised zone looks. McDermott has proven he can eat those guys alive. He's done it many times over the years, and I thought he just coached one of his best games that we've ever seen from him, like a brilliant game defensively versus the Jags. Lots of really well-designed late rotations, unpredictable coverage looks, just breaking tendencies left and right. Trevor Lawrence really did not know what he was looking at down to down, and I commend McDermott for mixing things up a lot and totally muddying that picture. So you have a number of plays where T-Law just didn't see a zone defender or just misanticipated where the openings would be because he thought the coverage was different from what it actually was. And he put a lot of balls in harm's way. 2 interceptions, 9 passes defended by the Bills. They got their hands on a whole lot of balls. And T-Law is a much better quarterback than Bo, especially with how he played late in the season. Like, T-Law was ripping everybody apart for the last month and a half, and I do think when it comes to pocket processing and pocket passing overall, he is much more advanced than Bo Nix, so I expect Bo to struggle in this matchup. And if you watch last year's playoff game between these two teams, the Bills' defense really had a beat on Bo, and they held Denver's offense to 7 points overall. Bo is often inaccurate when throwing downfield. He's bottom 5 in completion percentage over expected under pressure specifically this year. He's pretty damn low overall, and he was inaccurate when he tried to throw downfield in their meeting last year, and he was unsure of what he was looking at. And we know that he loves his checkdowns. This Denver offense is generally going to have one of the lowest completed air yards per attempt marks, but they are good at generating yards after the catch. They are one of the most dependent passing offenses on that after the catch production. The Bills allowed the fewest yards after catch in the NFL this year. And again, just the further you get into the specifics of the matchup, the more it's like this Bills pass defense has been very good, and they are specifically good in a way that is going to give Bo Nix trouble. Like, the Bills defense is second in DVOA out of 2 high looks. Bo Nix is 22nd in DVOA versus 2 high looks. Now, you mentioned the injuries to the Bills defense and to the Bills team overall. We'll get into that more later. Jordan Poyer probably not being able to go is a big deal in this one, even though he's 34 years old and they picked him up off the scrap heap. Like, he does have such a familiarity with the system. He's such a high IQ player. He's been pretty stable for them. Now you go to the 5th round rookie Jordan Hancock, who I think has been fine this year, but that is a big spot to put him in. Overall, though, I do think this Bills secondary has been playing at quite a high level. It is clearly the strength of this defense. That and McDermott's ability to scheme against these kind of run-of-the-mill average quarterbacks. That's really where this Bills defense is at their best. Obviously, this Broncos offensive line is exceptional, though. So as well as the Bills may be able to cover and create some confusion on the back end, they may also have to find creative ways to get pressure, because you don't think these edges, even though Rousseau and Bosa have had their moments, are going to win much against what is probably the best offensive line in football this year. But to me, that effort to generate pressure is mostly going to be about simulated pressures, again, creating a confusing picture, and selective blitzing. I think Bo has actually been better against the blitz than when he hasn't been blitzed this year. I think the Broncos are good enough in pass protection that you may not get home on some of those blitzes. And overall, I just wouldn't want to deploy that sort of like risky defensive strategy when I think trust your principles, trust your personnel, and really replicate the game plan you had against the Jags passing attack as closely as you can.
I think Bo is improved. I want to be clear about this, too. I think Bo is a better quarterback than he was a year ago when he stepped into this situation against Buffalo. That being said, I agree with you. I wouldn't be in a situation where if I was the Bills, my eyes would get bigger than my stomach. I wouldn't be trying to send the house. Bo Nix is still a quarterback that I want to force to consistently make good decision after good decision, throw good ball after throw good ball. Like, I want him to prove that he can be consistent. He can continually make good decision after good decision. I agree. I want to make him nickel and dime the ball down the field. I want him to pick apart my defense, and I want to prove he is capable of doing that. I don't want to give him opportunities with a stacked box where there's a one-on-one look where Cortland Sutton or Marvin Mims or somebody can take one to the house. I want to force him to really earn it and consistently make great decisions, and I think that is going to be, honestly, a tougher test for him than making, one big throw that could break this game open. I really want to force him to methodically move the ball up and down the field.
And that is always the Bills' philosophy, basically. Like, they are one of the lower blitz rate teams. Under McDermott, they've always been that kind of bend, don't break defense where it's like, okay, we're going to play a shit ton of zone. We're going to have 5 DBs on the field at all times, if not 6. And you may be able to nickel and dime us to a certain point, but eventually we're going to create some confusion. We're going to generate a turnover. And what we're certainly not going to do is allow you to hit on that big play. The Bills this year were top 5 in terms of limiting 20-plus yard pass plays. They only allowed 1 40-plus yard pass play all season. That is the fewest allowed in the NFL. So I think you're absolutely right. It is going to be on Bo to make a lot of good decisions, to generally be able to pick apart these looks that I think it's going to be really challenging for him to do that against. And I do think overall this year he struggled versus well-disguised defenses like the Chargers, who he had 2 really rough games against. He struggled versus this team last year, and generally, just speaking from the perspective of a Bills fan here, he inspires zero fear in me. Like, I just think he's not smart enough. He's not accurate enough. He's not athletic enough to expose the flaws that do exist in this Bills defense, specifically in the passing defense. So it's going to be interesting if the Bills can get pressure. And we know that Peyton likes to move the pocket around a lot for Bo. We saw some of that last year too with a lot of designed rollouts and whatnot. I think that actually might help the Bills because it limits the advantage the Broncos have to just straight up protect and win up front with that offensive line. But also, Bo is limited as a pocket passer. He does like being on the move a little bit more. Overall, I just think it's not that Bo had a terrible game against the Bills last year or that that's going to happen again. He's just limited in certain ways I think this defense is going to be able to exploit.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, less on Bo, the one exploitable flaw that's been proven in this Buffalo defense all year is the running game.
100%.
How do you think Denver attacks you guys, and do you think they have the personnel to really exploit you guys on that end? Like, could they convincingly have some of these long, sprawling drives on the ground where they just dominate you at the line of scrimmage? Do you think that should be a part of their attack, and do you think they can exploit you guys on that end?
It's a great question. It's the question that the Bills defense is going to have to face before every single game throughout this playoff run as they go along. It was kind of the clear Achilles heel on this team throughout the entire season. Like you mentioned, they're a bottom 3 run defense in the NFL. And the Jags last week, when they ran the ball, had a ton of success, and they should have run it more. Particularly, they had a lot of success on those outside runs, a lot of wide tosses that the Bills really, really struggle to defend on the perimeter. They are a light defense. They allow a lot of yards after contact in the run game, so there's a bunch of flaws there. I don't think that Denver is a well-built team to exploit that, though. And I think it is problematic for them that J.K. Dobbins is out because he was just by far the best ball carrier for this team. Their other running backs average just 4 yards per carry flat on the year. Since Dobbins got hurt, Denver is just 23rd in rushing production, under 105 yards per game. So Can Denver exploit this horrible Bills run defense? Probably a bit, because everybody can a bit. Everybody is going to perform at least a bit better on the ground against Buffalo than they usually would. But is Denver the kind of team that could keep the ball on the ground 35 times for 180 yards? Like, that is not going to happen in this game. I would be really surprised if it did. They like to throw the ball a lot. They haven't run the ball well. So I think they'll probably adjust their game plan some. They will definitely try to establish that run game early and see if they can get some easy ones there. But I really do not think they are the team that is going to exploit it to the max. So overall, I feel like this is a good matchup for the Bills defense for all the reasons that we laid out. What about the other side of the ball, Logan? As we look at the Bills offense going up against this Denver defense that was one of the elite units in football this year, what stands out in terms of where they have to execute and what are the keys?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the best defenses in football. I would say I think the recipe is winning with 4 and getting to Josh. I mean, I think pressure is the real strength of this Denver team. They're 5th in most sacks by a team in a single season in NFL history. They're great at getting pressure. I will say, I hate making this point because I think it was kind of I just want to be very clear when I say this. I don't think the Denver defense is like fake good because of some of these stats. I think some of their stats are going to be a little bit inflated because of a lighter schedule that they played. It's like the Patriots point that Carson made throughout the season. It's like, I'm not knocking them for winning games or being successful. I just think it's important to mention that some of these numbers, it's like a win is a win in this game, and you can only play who is in front of you. So I'm not going to ever discredit a team for winning a football game, but some of these numbers, like we talk about, maybe a little bit inflated from playing a little bit of a lighter schedule. That being said, the Denver defense was among one of the 3 best in football. They're elite at getting pressure. 5th most sacks in a single season. 2nd in terms of opponent completion percentage. They were the number 2 third down defense and the number 1 red zone defense. And I think those are a lot of the big keys that we're looking at here. Again, getting pressure with 4, winning at the point of attack. And I think winning situationally is going to be super crucial for this Denver defense too. The advantage that I think the Denver defense has is their secondary versus the limited weapons of Buffalo. Mm-hmm. Can these receivers create separation, and can Denver's front 4 win at the line of scrimmage? That's what I'm looking at in the passing attack. Is Joe Brady going to be able to scheme guys open? Interrelated with that too, though, I think the thing that could break this game wide open is the rushing attack with James Cook, because the Bills have been one of the elite rushing games in football, and I think it was frustrating last week, Carson, against Jacksonville, how on early downs, how often they kept going back to the rush. But if they can be just as effective, I just think at a point the Denver linebackers are going to have to play the rush if they can get it going. And I think that is going to open up this game if Buffalo can establish it early on. Obviously, it's easier said than done, and I mentioned how successful Denver was against the pass. They were league average in terms of EPA per rush. So I think they're a better passing defense than they are a rushing defense. And if Buffalo can establish it at the line of scrimmage, I think Denver's going to have to at least divert a little bit more of their personnel towards stopping the rush, and that's going to open it up for Josh on the back end. But it's not going to be a walk in the park. I think this is one of the tougher defenses that Josh has faced all year. I think Houston was probably the toughest. If I had to pick somebody, I would say Denver is the second toughest. It's not going to be easy, but I actually think I'm fairly confident in Buffalo being able to let me be clear about when I say this. I'm confident in Buffalo being able to have extended, longer drives and being able to move the ball effectively. I think it's going to be, can they convert third downs? Is Josh going to be a superhuman on third downs? And are they going to be able to put the ball in the end zone? I really think it's going to be purely situationally dependent. Who is going to win the big downs in this football game? And if you ask me, you guys know where I'm going to land on this side of the fence. I am going to bet on Josh Allen winning in these big moments and making superhuman plays. He's just the player that I have the most confidence in left in the playoff field. I don't just mean that at the quarterback position. I mean at any position. Josh Allen would be my number 1 player remaining in the playoffs, and I am just going to bet on him But I do think Denver has the personnel to compete. Again, I think they have a real advantage in terms of their secondary personnel individually versus the Buffalo receivers. And I think Dalton Kincaid's health is going to be huge in this game. He is questionable for this football game. And you've mentioned a million times on this show the difference in effectiveness of this Bills offense with or without Dalton Kincaid this year.
100%. They're now 11-2 with him. They average 30 points per game. Without him, they're 2-3. They average 23 points per game. I do think he's going to play. There was the concern that he was seen in a walking boot post game. McDermott said that that was precautionary, so it seems like he's going to be a go, but 100%. If there were something surprising to happen there, that would change things meaningfully because he's the number one weapon in the passing game for this team, and particularly essential in this matchup because this is what I come back to. Denver is a great defense. There's no question about it. But I think this is a pretty good matchup for the Bills offense. Like, another reason that I like this game in terms of matchup a fair bit more for them than I did the Jags one is I think the Bills can get big and bully the Broncos in a way they couldn't versus the Jags. They have a meaningful size advantage up front. And I want to be clear, the Broncos defensive front is really, really good. But the Bills are bigger. They ran the ball in dominant fashion versus Denver last year in the playoffs. 213 yards on the ground and just totally dictated there. There was a play where James Cook got carried for like 10 extra yards at the end of a run. Like, it was just symbolic of the sort of physical dominance they had in that matchup. Last week, as you mentioned, we saw the Bills' run game taken away in a way that was really, really rare. And they still had a great offensive performance versus a great defense. So that's great that they're capable of that because they have Josh Allen, who's the best quarterback in the NFL. But this week, I expect them to have much more success running the ball and have a much more balanced offensive attack overall. The Broncos' run defense is very good, but as you said, it's not as stellar as their pass defense. We saw the Colts bully them on the ground early this season. Elite offensive line, elite run game. We saw the Bills do it last year. They really set the tone in that regard, and I believe Buffalo can do that again. And overall, I want them to go big. And what I mean by that is lots of 12 personnel, lots of 13 personnel, lots of 22 personnel, multiple tight ends on the field for a significant majority of the game, I would say. Not just to have those big boys out there blocking in the run game and be even more physically assertive there, but also to get their strengths out there in the passing game and attack Denver's defense in the passing game. Because the Bills love their tight ends. As we said, Dalton Kincaid is their best weapon. He's been a game changer for this team. Overall, when targeting their top three tight ends, that's Kincaid, Dawson Knox, and Jackson Hawes, Buffalo has a 132 passer rating this year. It has been incredibly efficient when they throw to the big boys. Meanwhile, Denver has allowed all other targets, excluding tight ends, a 73.5 passer rating when teams throw at those guys. We know how insane Patrick Surtain is. He's the best cornerback in the NFL. He's the ultimate eraser of a number one receiver if you've got one. But when opposing teams have targeted tight ends, Denver has allowed a 95.2 passer rating. Teams have had success going to their tight ends against the Broncos. They allowed the 9th most yards to tight ends, and from week 7 on, they allowed the 3rd most yards to tight ends. That's huge for the Bills, that Buffalo's strength in the passing game, especially when you look at the healthy personnel this week with all the receivers that are down for them from this already weak receiving core, to be able to go against the vulnerability in Denver's passing defense is really a key part of this matchup and a meaningful advantage for them. Last year, we saw Knox and Kincaid both eat against Denver in the playoffs. They went for 85 combined yards. They each had an explosive play. So I want Buffalo to go to their tight ends, go at the linebackers. Alex Singleton has been an every down linebacker for Denver. He's got a 122 passer rating when targeted. I think he can go at Hufanga.
I was just going to mention Singleton wasn't even available for the playoff game last year, so he is going to be. That's a minor difference. Hufanga, Greenlaw, and Singleton are all new additions to this battle for this year.
Absolutely. But I think the Bills can find a lot of success like that going at a couple of those guys, those bigger bodies in coverage who are going to be matched up with the tight ends. And I think that is how the Bills achieve complementary offense at its absolute best, where they establish the run and they're successful in that regard. That feeds the play action passing game where they're so effective. And that's probably my favorite part of Joe Brady's play calling is when he's able to design some of those play action plays. I think they put their strength in the passing game against Denver's weakness. And I also think Surtain is just less significant in this matchup than maybe he would be against any other team because it's not like he's going to shut down some elite receiver here. Like, if he's matched up with Keon Coleman, that's fine. Keon Coleman was only going to get like one catch anyways. This Bills offense is just very unique in how much it is heavily predicated upon throwing to the tight ends, but in general, spreading the ball around. Khalil Shakir is clearly the number one wide receiver here, right? He had 12 catches last week. He was huge, but even he is mostly playing out of the slot. So I would expect Jaquan McMillan to be on him more so than Surtain. Maybe Surtain travels and plays more inside, but McMillan's a good player too. My point is, I think there is an opportunity here for them to get big, go with the tight ends a lot in this one, and avoid a couple of those Broncos strengths at corners without it limiting their passing game, because it's not like, oh man, we can't throw to Keon Coleman. Oh man, we can't be peppering Brandon Cooks 7-8 times a game. And obviously, Riley Moss is a solid corner. He is somebody, though, who they might have an opportunity to target. Whether you think it's reverse racism or not, we know that he has the most penalties against him in the NFL, and I do wonder if maybe that's where Brandon Cooks could get a shot play downfield. He has been effective as a deep ball receiver for them. But overall, I always wanted the Bills to go with a lot of those multiple tight ends looks in this matchup. Now, it's a real no-brainer, though. It's almost like it's not even a decision because if you aren't aware, this Bills receiving core is absolutely decimated right now. Gabe Davis now out for the year. He tore his ACL. Tyrell Shavers out for the year, tore his ACL. By the way, Shavers heroically played 22 second-half snaps last week after tearing his ACL, which is just nuts. Absolute dog. But that's brutal because those guys had been two of the four most productive wide receivers for this team ever since Gabe joined the team in mid-November. And obviously, like we talk about, they distribute the ball a crazy amount. So it's not that either of those guys were really getting much usage, but they were valuable parts of this receiving core, and they're also both strong blockers. And there is just an element of trust with Josh and Gabe, like a third down spot, a red zone spot. With his size, he can be a contested catcher. And then Shavers really came along and was the only vertical threat in this passing game, really, other than Brandon Cooks. So you add on to that the fact that Josh Palmer and Curtis Samuel, the two most highest paid wide receivers for the Bills. It's kind of crazy to think those guys are the two highest paid receivers, but both on IR. So they were already down those guys. Curtis Samuel may return this week, but my point is your entire receiving room right now is Shakir, who I love, Brandon Cooks, who they got off waivers a month and a half ago, Keon Coleman, who they benched a number of times this year. He was getting DNP's coach's decision, and then maybe Curtis Samuel. That's all that you have at wide receivers. So Brandon Cooks has been a big add. He's got 159 yards in the last two games. He's got 3 catches of 35-plus yards. He has added that dimension of the deep passing game that no other receiver could. But this is a pretty ridiculous receiving core to bring into a second-round playoff game. So that does make you want to run and go to the tight ends even more. That was already going to be a good game plan for Buffalo. Now it's, again, the no-brainer. That is their ideal path to winning this football game, and I think they can execute it really well because of the strengths they have here.
I completely agree. I think that is where they're going to have to win, and if Denver's going to win at the point of attack and shut down this Buffalo offense, they're going to have to get pressure, and I think that's probably the final most interesting battle in the trenches. You know, we can hype up the Denver pass rush, and we should. They've got studs everywhere. You know, Nick Bonito, Cooper. I don't know if Franklin Myers is going to play. He's a big body in the middle of his defense, too. He's super effective. Like
Zach Allen's fantastic. Their
Zach Allen's an all-pro caliber guy. Yeah, like this team is loaded up front. That being said, you can't be quick to write off the Buffalo offensive line either. This is one of the best pass protecting and run blocking units in football, and I think this matchup very well could decide this football game, too. Again, how convincingly does Denver win with 3 or 4 pass rushers? Can they stop the run at the point of attack? Can they get pressure home on Josh Allen? That's to be determined. I have a little bit more faith in it's going to sound crazy. I do have more faith in the Bills' offensive line. I do think it's one of the top 5 offensive lines in football. They're going to have their hands full in this game, no doubt. I mean, Benito, Cooper, and Allen can just take over and destroy games. That being said, again, we talk about the Buffalo offensive line. The other component is you got to take down the fridge back there that is Josh Allen, and he's not just the size of a fridge. It's like if you put a fridge on roller skates, man. The guy has, he's got some rocket boosters on his feet. The guy's a beast getting out of the pocket and creating, and so that's easier said than done that you're going to bring down Josh Allen in the pocket. And that's the final area and final kind of real battle that I'm really watching in this game for this Buffalo offense, just how much pressure Josh is under. And the reason I bring that up, too, not only is because I think it's going to be an interesting battle to watch down the down, the injuries that Josh Allen potentially has coming into this game and how it could affect him potentially in quarters 2 through 4, but also the rest of these playoffs if Buffalo does win. Josh is not only just coming in here with the foot injury that he sustained prior to the playoffs beginning, he got rocked last week. Like, he took a bunch of big shots. You know, if it's a concussion, if it's a hand injury, Josh took a beating. He is obviously not at 100%. You know, I'm not going to say Josh is, he's always coming in here battered and beaten up, but I can say he is not at 100%. And so Sean Payton is a dirty SOB. I can say that. No, I'm not just saying that because, I don't like Sean Payton. It is a proven thing with Sean Payton. And look, I'm not condoning this. I'm not saying that this is moral or this is just.
It's like when you said that Tony Bradley should bring a large mallet.
I did.
And hit Shea over the head with it.
If I was playing against Josh Allen, that would certainly be my recipe.
You bring back the bounties. You bring back Bounty Gate.
I am not lying when I say that. I would tell one of my 3rd or 4th edge rushers or linebackers, go knock his block off. Go crack his ass. Because that's going to give you the edge to win this football game. And like Tom Brady or Bill Belichick said, you're not cheating. You're not trying hard enough. So
just horrible ethics from Logan Campbell. Probably right. Denver probably will have some message.
I'm just saying, look,
they're going to try to get their licks in where they can. That is for sure.
I think that is something to monitor in this football game. And if I'm trying to create a little bit of an edge in this game, I'm trying to go at a not 100% Josh Allen. And I think that's something to watch during this football game because, I don't know, man. You get one good lick, it could change the complexity of this football game. I hope for our sake that doesn't happen, but I know Sean Payton's track record in big football games. And so I think that certainly might be on the table.
Yeah, I'd probably off myself if Josh went out with an injury in the divisional round this year. It'd probably be the end of the line for me. But the good news is, although Josh does have several of these nagging injuries and bumps and bruises, I do think he has like a superhero regenerative ability where he's played through so many nicks over the years and like has delivered that elite production no matter what. And last year, as many hits as he took, and you mentioned the hit to the head and the jammed finger and the twisted knee when his foot was already messed up, he still played an outstanding game, literally a flawless game. So that's one of the last big keys to talk about in this game. The Bills have Josh Allen, and Josh is dialed the fuck in right now. And we all know the numbers, but just real quick, he's number 1 all-time in total yards per game in the playoffs, minimum of 8 games. He's number 1 in touchdown-to-turnover ratio, 36-6. And, Logan, I sold him short last week. He's number 1 in total touchdowns per game because I forgot to count the 1 receiving touchdown that he had against the Texans his first year in the playoffs. So, one of the all-time great playoff performers coming off of a dominant performance. He was extremely comfortable in this matchup last year, and he was really surgical against Denver. He had a 2.68 second time to throw in that game. That was the second quickest of the weekend. This past week, he had a 2.6 second time to throw, the quickest of the weekend. So I just think that's a good indicator in terms of him taking what's there most of the game. And then when it comes to some of those big time key plays that are going to swing this one, last week, under pressure, Josh Allen was 9 of 12 for 144 yards. He was the best performer of the weekend under pressure. Last year, versus the Broncos in the playoffs, 6 of 9 under pressure for 98 yards and a touchdown. So that's probably what this one is going to look like. It's going to be, okay, take what's there, methodically move the team down the field for the most part, and then make great plays under pressure when you need to. There is nobody I am more confident in to do that than Josh Allen. You mentioned the key downs, the key situational stuff, and that's such a good point. This is, in my opinion, the best situational offense when you look at third down plus red zone execution. The Bills are top 4 in both those categories this year. Since 2020, they're the number 1 third down offense overall, the number 2 red zone offense. I just think Josh is the best red zone quarterback we've ever seen because of the combination of what he can do as a passer and what he does with his legs, where he's one of the best red zone rushing threats in NFL history alone. And then I think he's one of the absolute best third down players ever, just because he can do so many spectacular things to make a play happen on those gotta have it downs. All that to say, every one of these key categories we can look at and we can say, boy, you're going up against a really stingy Denver defense and you got to execute in these ways. I have a lot of confidence in Josh to do that. It is going to be interesting to see if there are scrambling opportunities against a team that plays this much man. Denver's defense is interesting, not just because they're so elite, but because they're top of the league in terms of man coverage percentage. Almost 40% of the time they play man, and they are one of the 5 most frequent blitzing teams. So they're kind of a unique defense in that way, but you do generally have more opportunities to scramble against man, and Josh had success with his legs against them last year in the playoffs. He had 8 attempts for 46 yards on the ground. Is he going to be as willing to take off with his foot and his knee situation? We'll see. The Bills were clearly unafraid to use him as a short yardage battering ram last week. That is a little different, though, maybe than him getting out running full speed. But honestly, I fully anticipate him doing that. And even if he doesn't have 100% of his speed, I think we saw enough last week to think he's going to be incredibly dangerous outside the pocket with his legs, as always. So you can look at this receiver situation. I fully believe Josh can elevate this passing game, even with these super limited receivers, because he's been doing that for the last 2 years, right? Like, it sucks that the depth has gotten this comically thin, and it's like, oh, Gabe, Tyrell, they were playing kind of nice football for us, and now they're gone. But it has been some version of very limited receiver play, especially outside of Khalil Shakir. Josh, can you still make us a top 3 offense? Can you still carry the passing game? He's done it over and over again. So as much as I'm praising Josh, and I do that every week, I know, because he deserves it, he obviously has to be good for Buffalo to win this game. I don't think he has to be Superman, though. And I've seen that narrative, and it makes sense because, right, he is the best quarterback in football. He is elevating this roster that is not among the absolute strongest in football. And last week, he did have to be Superman for them to win. I just think with the strengths the Bills have in the run game and with how their defense can keep Bo in check, like, again, they have more advantages in this matchup than they did against Jacksonville, where Jacksonville was able to shut down the run. They played T-Law well, but he's still just a more dynamic quarterback, and that was just a better offense, and Jacksonville put up 24. So in all of those ways, the bar that Josh had to clear was higher than I think it has to be this week. But, of course, I do think he can do whatever it takes to win, and there could not be a bigger gap in my faith in a quarterback in this playoff field than there is between Josh Allen and Bo Nix. And just real quick, obviously, I'm not a Bo guy, and I think that he is the reason that I don't have more confidence in this Broncos team that is so talented in so many other ways. But everybody has taken the angle of, oh, the Bills' path is so light, Josh's path is so light because they're facing some of these flawed quarterbacks. They're not facing the elite quarterbacks. I do think it's worth remembering that Josh Allen faces defenses, and Josh Allen is facing 2 elite defenses to start the playoffs. A Jags team that was top 5 in EPA, top 5 in points per drive allowed, and a Denver defense that is even better.
What a stupid argument.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stupid arguments.
Well, I just think, guys, like, Mahomes and Lamar didn't make the playoffs. So
right. I know. Well, it goes even beyond that, though, and I want to be clear. I think that it does matter that the Bills are facing some of these weaker, more flawed offenses because it doesn't put as much of a burden on their offense to score 35 to win. But when you look at what Josh is doing individually, if you look at his production, you consider the context, you consider who this offense does have catching passes, and you consider the defenses they're going up against, which are formidable and may well continue to be very formidable if they get past this. I mean, there are some insane defenses left in the field with Denver, with Houston, with Seattle. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Josh could end up facing like 4 of the 5 best defenses in the NFL this year, and we'll see how he performs. Obviously, I am getting ahead of myself when I say that, but I just do think that's important. How impressive what he did last week was, and I think he can do another really good performance against a very good defense. So a couple other small keys that stand out to me in this one, just some of the advantages that come with Denver having the bye as the 1 seed. Obviously, home field advantage is significant here. We've seen a number of teams kind of struggle with operational issues. Mile High is loud as all hell. You have the literal altitude component. That's worth a couple points in the lines for this game.
This may sound stupid. I actually think it hurts a team like Denver having the bye.
Really?
Just because I think their offense is, in terms of a rhythm standpoint, and I could be wrong. Maybe Sean Payton has this team more prepared than ever because they've had 2 weeks to get ready for this football game, and they're super tight and ironed out. I just wonder in terms of a rhythm thing with how I feel about Bo Nix, if maybe they come out and they're a little bit sluggish on their first couple of drives. But they didn't have a good rhythm
in their last
and maybe their offense just isn't that good. That's a good point too, man.
My counterpoint to that would be the health factor of it alone.
They're
and the
just
rest.
rested,
The Bills are coming into this game with so many more injuries, and I do think that is an important factor here. Who is healthy for the Bills? Can Ed Oliver come back is the biggest thing. Ed is one of the best players on this defense. He makes them more decent against the run with his presence inside. He's an effective pass rusher, can bring some of that interior pressure. Again, he's going up against a great matchup if he does play, but that would be a big addition for them to get back. I would love to have Ty Johnson back out there, who missed last week. He had a huge play against the Broncos last year in the playoffs. He and Josh connected on a great 4th down touchdown, and just overall, he's a really good 3rd down back when it comes to picking up blitzes and pass protection and what he can do as a pass catcher. He adds a sort of value that is distinct from James Cook, and so he matters to this team. And Curtis Samuel, is he ready to go? Do the Bills even have like a 4th actual receiver for this game? That matters. Kincaid and Josh being banged up, are they 100% or close to it? There's just a lot to monitor with the Bills, as we've touched on. They had the 4th most total value lost to injury in the NFL this season. That's according to Sports Info Solutions. The only playoff team that lost more value due to injury, unsurprisingly, the San Francisco 49ers, who have been through hell and back. So the Bills have had a lot of those tough injury breaks deep into seasons in recent years. This year, not an exception. Hopefully they can get a couple of those guys healthy, but I do like this matchup for them. We saw how last year went, and Buffalo really dominated, and I'm not saying it's the same matchup, right? Things change year over year in the NFL on both sides, of course, for all 32 teams. Are the Broncos better than last year? I do think so, a bit. But I do have to say, they are not 4 games better. The difference between this year's Broncos and last year's Broncos is not as big as the perception may be, as the record may suggest, as the seeding may suggest. They had a higher point differential last year. They were 10th in Week 18 adjusted DVOA last year, and they were 10th in DVOA this year. They were 23rd in yards per drive, 16th in points per drive last year. Limited, below average offense. This year, 18th in yards per drive, 19th in points per drive. Limited, below average offense. Their defense, it's elite, of course. It was already elite last year, and it was actually 1st in points per drive allowed last year versus 3rd in points per drive allowed this year. And I do think their defense slipped a little towards the end of the year. We talked about the Packers and Jags games back to back. They had 6 one-score wins versus teams with 5 wins or fewer this year. That is the most ever by a team to make the playoffs. So a lot of really tight wins that they snuck out against really bad teams. Denver's been better in the clutch than last year. You mentioned the 7 game-winning drives. They've been able to execute that. But are they a fundamentally different team? No. Have the key matchups here fundamentally changed? No. So I have to say, Logan, we didn't redo our top 10 contenders after the season ended. We just went right into playoff mode. But I did rank privately, well, I sent it to you, my AFC fear index for the Bills, just which teams I did not want them to see the most. I had Denver 4th there. I had them behind the Jags, behind the Texans, behind the Pats. So I do believe the Bills have the balanced offense to produce versus this defense, and it is hard for me to see Bo beating this team when I expect the Bills to put up points and I expect their passing defense and Sean McDermott to give him some trouble. So last year I predicted a 24-point win for the Bills, and it was a 24-point win. This year I am predicting an 8-point win. I'm going to take the Bills 28-20.
The Broncos definitely have a chance to win this game. I think it's going to be 1 to 2 turnovers on their end.
Yep.
James Cook drops a ball inexplicably, and they pick it up. Josh Allen throws a boneheaded interception, gets under pressure. I think 1 to 2 turnovers is a part of the recipe for Denver, and I think 1 to 2 big shot plays. Sean Payton has proven that he's a creative offensive mind. You know, if it's cooking up a flea flicker, if it's cooking up something on the back end, and they do have explosive playmakers like Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin that could make a big play or two happen. Again, I do just have more faith in this Bills team and Josh Allen and McDermott, their experience in these situations, but I think it's possible. I think those things are going to have to come true, though. A couple of big plays on offense and a couple of big turnovers on the back end, and that would swing this game in favor for Denver. That being said, I'm actually going to take a 10-point victory for the Bills.
Wow.
I'm going to say they win 30-20.
I will also lay out the formula for a Denver upset in my eyes. I think Peyton outcoaches McDermott. He's able to find some ways to expose some holes in this defense, and maybe Denver can exploit this run defense more than I'm anticipating, so they get that going, and that simplifies the offense for them a bit. And then I really do think it's going to mostly be on their defense and their ability to make this Bills offense uncomfortable, to take a little bit of a chunk out of their usual production if they can. Pass rush dominating, corners dominating. That combination of elite coverage and elite pressure, I mean, those are the two things that are going to bust any offense. That's what we saw when the Texans got the Bills, for example. Now, the Texans were able to do it rushing 4 overwhelmingly, whereas the Broncos are much more prone to blitzing. But regardless, if the receivers really prove to be an issue against this strong Broncos secondary, and if the Bills' offensive line, which is very good in its own right, but is overwhelmed by this elite Denver pass rush, that would probably be the formula. And then maybe Denver can limit the run game more than I'm anticipating. Maybe it's different from last year. Maybe they put the Bills in more 3rd and longs, and that's when they can really pin their ears back and be aggressive with the pass rush and get them in passing downs where they are more dictating the game flow. The Broncos, obviously, Denver can win this game. They won 14 of them. They're the 1 seed. They're an elite defense. They're really well coached. Ultimately, though, I do like the Bills here, and I feel good about this matchup for them going into it, and it's going to be so much fun, dude. I mean, 45 minutes previewing Bills-Broncos. Sorry, guys, but if you're watching Nerd Sesh, come on, baby. This is what you want. This is what the people want. This has been setting up all year for a gladiator battle. In fact, in both of our pre-playoff predictions, we foresaw this matchup happening at some point. I thought it would be the AFC title game. You correctly predicted it would be this round, so let's roll the balls out and play. It's going to get our weekend started, and it's going to be electric.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Whether you're starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard. But in life and on Prize Picks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoops action almost every night, the action never stops. And Prize Picks lets you take control.
We know all you guys, all you sickos, all you nerds are already watching every second of all these games anyways, so if you want to get in on the daily fantasy fun as well, and if there's a player who you're feeling high on, who you think is underrated, or vice versa, if you've been pushing agendas for or against them, put together a lineup. You can pick more or less on their player projections and let it ride.
Even though my fantasy league is over with Prize Picks, I don't have to wait until next year's draft to keep playing fantasy. Prize Picks lets you play fantasy football every week, even in the playoffs. Pick your favorite players and win when they hit their projections every week. No draft required.
Also, as a new feature, Prize Picks now has early payouts. So if your player gets off to a hot start, you have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. And with the new social feeds feature, if you want, you can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups from winners with a single click. Copy lineups you like or use them as inspiration for your own picks.
Download the Prize Picks app today and use code NERDSESH to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code NERDSESH to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right.
Next up on the slate, Logan, another highly anticipated matchup. 2 divisional rivals who just met a couple weeks ago. They were playing for the 1 seed. Now they're playing in the divisional round. Seahawks, Niners, Logan. Let's go to the first key matchup that stands out here. This Niners offense against a Seahawks defense that has been utterly dominant. How do you expect that battle to go?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of moving parts about this matchup that concern me. You know, Seattle is one of these defenses that plays a lot in nickel because they have these elite defensive backs who can tackle, and so it gives them a little bit of a speed advantage. You know, they're a little smaller, but they're super fast, and they're super well coached. Honestly, the coaching battle is the most intriguing thing to me about this matchup. How much does Kyle Shanahan get into his bag versus a Mike McDonald defense that is so buttoned up and prepared? This is the toughest game that I liked Seattle a lot. I have picked them to the Super Bowl. This NFC West, man.
This one's giving you trouble.
This is the most, I'm pretty solid on who I'm going to take in these other two matchups. This is the closest that I am between both of these games. And it's just because of coaching, man. I have such a level of faith in Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh. They're geniuses. They are going to have these guys buttoned up. Ultimately, the edge for me and why I'm going to take Seattle to win this game is just because of injuries. But specifically in this matchup, for the San Francisco offense, I think you have a heavy dose of Christian McCaffrey. Considering all the injuries that this team has, and specifically the George Kittle injury is going to be massive for me in this game. Unfortunately, Kittle tore his Achilles last week. He is going to be out for this one. He had surgery immediately after the game. That's a huge blow to San Francisco's opportunity to win this game. That being said, they will have big Trent Williams out there for this game. And that is he was there last week. Having him out there is going to be huge. The Kittle blow matters. They're going to have to get McCaffrey going. I think that's a huge component to me. I'm putting the ball in his hands a lot. Early downs, handing the ball off, short check down routes. I'm just getting him involved. But there's a couple other factors. One, I hate picking on him. How much does Brock Purdy crumble? Brock Purdy came up huge last week against Philadelphia when they needed him, but he did throw 2 bad interceptions, and we can't just gloss over that. That is going to come back to bite you on the ass against Seattle. It's not going to cost you against a team like Philadelphia because their offense is incompetent, and Kevin Patullo is one of the worst offensive coordinators in football. If you do that against Seattle, you're going to lose. And so that is huge to me. And I don't have a lot of faith in Purdy. Purdy scares me. And it's not really a skill issue. It's more of his height. I think the pure fact that Brock Purdy can't see over the line of scrimmage sometimes hurts him. And he just has to kind of blind faith throw these balls to where he said it himself. He's like, sometimes I'm just throwing balls to spots and hoping my guys are going to be there. So I'm looking at Purdy and his composure. And it's kind of like a 50-50 thing to me with Purdy because I've seen Purdy in high-leverage situations come through and play damn near perfect football games like the Super Bowl where, you would go back and look at that game. The only throw that he misses is basically one in overtime that would have potentially won that game for San Francisco. Last week, he throws 2 really costly interceptions. So, obviously, Purdy is a huge guy to monitor in this game. But if there's any guy that can maximize his offensive talent and create a game plan to match up against one of the best defenses in football, I know they were disappointing. I know they were overwhelmed by the amount of pressure that Seattle got on them the last time we saw these teams battle, right? San Francisco scored 3 points against this team last time they faced off. If there's a guy that's going to be able to gimmick up a game plan and create something, it is Kyle Shanahan. This is it for my money, and you've been banging this drum all season long, Carson. It's the best coaching staff in football. They won 12 games this year for a reason, overwhelmingly more than anything else. It's because of that coaching staff. And so, Juwan Jennings threw a touchdown last week. Does Shanahan get into his bag? He's the most passing touchdowns by a non-quarterback in NFL playoff history, man.
Hey, how about that?
So that's a huge component to me. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the Niners have some long drives. They end up getting into the end zone a few times. I'm going to lean on the Seattle defense winning more just because they are so much more talented. They have become more and more healthy as the season has gone along. And I'm going to mention this off the top.
Yeah.
I really think the Niners have gotten fucked by some of these scheduling things.
I thought you were going to say the electrical substation that's weakening all the collagen. And,
I don't know, man.
That's an
interesting narrative. There's not enough quantitative evidence behind it for me to lean on that.
I still think Niners fans should go and blow it up.
I agree.
Because at this point, you just got to eliminate variables. It's
exactly
like how they say if you've got a pet who's got an allergy, they can't actually allergy test. So the only way to see what they're allergic to is just remove things from the environment. You just got to go out there and blow up the electrical substation. It's all good.
Exactly.
I'll cover for you. Don't even worry about it. This is my neighborhood. This is my city, bro. What I say goes. And Santa Clara is not my city, but, the Bay Area generally.
It's their 5th straight game on a short week, and I think that's fucked up, man. They keep playing the Niners on these
crazy.
Dude, 6 days of rest. And, I know that doesn't seem like that big of a difference just one day, but it is huge when you're talking about football. Sunday, they played them on a Monday. After that Monday, they played them on a Sunday. After that Sunday, they played them on a Saturday. It's just, I feel bad for the Niners that they can't get this extra day of rest, that they can't get these full weeks. And that does matter to me a little bit. And they've gotten beaten by this injury bug. Literally, I think more than anything else, no matter what happens at the outcome of this game, and I know I'm talking like the Niners have lost this game already, which they haven't. They have a real chance to win this one. This season is a testament to their coaching staff and the resilience of this team, even down to the guy who stepped up for them in a spot. They wouldn't be in the spot without Mac Jones. You know what I mean? Him stepping in and going on his run. So no matter what happens in this game, it is a testament to the elite resilience and the coaching staff of this Niners team. But I think for this offense to succeed, they're going to have to control the line of scrimmage. I think Brock Purdy is going to have to play a really good game and not turn the ball over. I think they're going to have to get McCaffrey involved. And Shanahan ultimately is probably going to have to gimmick up this offense a little bit and get into the bag of tricks to win this game.
I agree with a lot of what you just said. If the Niners do win this game, I will never shut up about Kyle Shanahan being the GOAT, because that would just be such an incredible accomplishment. And Saleh for sure. But they are fighting at a real talent deficit now. And specifically, I do look at the challenge the offense has here, because they're not just facing one of the best defenses in the NFL. They're facing one of the best defenses this century, Logan. I think the Texans and Seahawks are both that great. I think the Broncos are also great. Not quite at that historic level of dominance, though, but this big three that we have defensively, I was just pondering yesterday. You know how I love to ponder, Logan. And I was like, I don't know that I can think of a defensive big three of teams like this in the playoff field in the last 2 decades. We've seen some insane two-headed monsters. 2015, you look at the Broncos and the Seahawks. Actually, 2012, you have the Seahawks and Niners, same division. That was electric. 2008, you've got Steelers, Ravens, again, same division. I thought there would be some year you look back and it's like the Ravens, Patriots, and Steelers were all insane defensively in the same year. They never really all coincided at that level at the same time. It was more so like, oh, 2 of the teams are elite this year and the other one is just pretty good, and then that would kind of oscillate. But you're the football historian here. Is there somebody I'm missing in terms of a defensive big three that surpasses this? Our friend Gabe shouted out 2023 Chiefs, Ravens, Niners, and I thought that was a good shout, but still not at this level.
Yeah, the only one I could think of was the 2004 playoffs, and I don't know if the only teams that played against each other were the Steelers and Patriots, nothing in division. It was the 04 Steelers, the 04 Patriots, and the 04 Eagles. The Steelers were number 1 in terms of scoring defense at 15.7, and the Eagles and Pats were both tied at 16.3 points allowed per game. So
that's a good shout.
That would be and then, I mean, I think if you look back to the 1970s, if you look to a 76 or a 77, there's probably a group of 3 teams of that era, but that to me is a completely different style of football.
Right.
When we were talking about this version, I think you would have to look at a pretty modern, and if not that, then I would look to you have to look back, regardless of where you're looking, you got to look back at least 20 years to me. And then I would go to the 02 Bucks and the Ravens, and those are, all-time kind of talks.
Right, and I would say even when you look at that little pocket in history with that Bucks team that won, with that Ravens team that
even
won.
That's a drastically different style of football. Exactly.
Totally. Offenses were more limited, defenses were just kind of
the running game was
so
still
at that time.
Exactly, and the running game was so much more important at that time, and it's always important, but the game has changed and transformed so much.
I just think it's very interesting with all the offensive growth that we have seen and we associate with the game, and I did this whole deep dive earlier in the year into how much offense really is the key to winning Super Bowls. Better offenses tend to win compared to defenses, especially offenses that elevate in the playoffs. All that to say, this year, we've got 3 insane defenses that are on 3 of the best teams in the NFL driving their success, so it'll be interesting to see how they all fare. I don't think out of those three teams there's a better all-around team than Seattle, and the defense is utterly dominant. We saw that in the head-to-head matchups between these two teams this season. They had two defensive battles, man. The Niners scored 20 total points across two meetings. The Seahawks scored 26 total points across two meetings. Although I will say Seattle left a lot on the board in that second game. Like, they may have only won 13-3. They really dominated. They had more than double the total yardage, 23 first downs to 9, 361 total yards to 173. And their offense had a pretty solid day, better than the raw scoring totals would indicate, just because they left a lot of points on the board, a couple missed field goals, failed fourth down conversion inside the 5. But that offensive production for the Niners is very concerning. That is paltry. And I really worry about the Niners offense against this Seahawks defense, because in that last meeting, Seattle completely took away the run game. CMC carried 8 times for 23 yards. And then Seattle was also insane in coverage, and they got pressure. And just re-watching that game, watching the film, Brock Purdy, man, had nothing all day. He averaged 4 yards per pass, including sack yardage lost, as CMC got nothing on the ground. Purdy had 4 completions of 7 or more air yards, so was not able to throw the ball downfield very much at all. And the thing is, there were no yards after the catch, man. It was just checkdowns that were well covered and immediately swallowed up because these corners tackle so well. They just stick everybody immediately after the catch. So I just think everything is going to be really hard for this Niners offense. And now, as you mentioned, Kittle is out, and I feel so bad for that guy.
And potentially Ricky Pearsall, too, which Pearsall is a beast and it would really help in this matchup. Which, totally. I don't know. I want to be clear about this. We are recording this in the middle of the week. It's like 50-50 right now. I am going to guess that Pearsall doesn't play, but Ricky himself has said he is trying to work his way back. And again, with the Kittle injury, and Tonjes is a good tight end, but I mean, Kittle's one of the best tight ends in football,
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you just need all the firepower you can get. So I think that is something to monitor, and just it would really help if a guy like Pearsall was available for the Niners this week.
Absolutely. And I also just feel so bad for Kittle that, like, he's had so many injuries, but now he's 32. You tear your Achilles. The guy downed a whole bottle of Patron as he was getting his X-ray or MRI or whatever. But, man, he might miss all of next season because of the timing of this. It happened in January. That's just really brutal. But part of my concern here for San Francisco is the offensive flaws, the inefficient run game, which has been an issue all year, inconsistent Brock Purdy, as we've seen these last couple weeks against really good defenses, being down some of these weapons. But it is more so just about Seattle's defense being one of the best this century. And we can almost forget, I think, as we think about the Seattle defense that is so elite versus the pass, and the secondary is such a signature unit for them, and they're second in yards per pass allowed, that they're first in rushing yards per attempt allowed. And as you mentioned, they do that overwhelmingly out of nickel and in tons of split safety looks. That is really the superpower here. The fact that Seattle is able to shut down the run out of those personnel groups that really should be more favored to playing the pass. So when you can obliterate the run like that, now you've got your best personnel out there to defend the pass, and you're really just a flawless defense, which is what they are. And they get pressure up front. Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams are monsters. They absolutely eat up space in terms of stopping the run. Like I'm saying, they're a perfect defense. They basically are. They're second in terms of lowest explosive play rate allowed in the last 15 years, while they are 6th in takeaways. So you never get big plays. They generate big plays defensively. They are incredible situationally. Number 1 in third down defense, top 5 in red zone defense, dominant versus the run, dominant versus the pass. They've effectively allowed 2 good offensive performances all year, Logan. The Rams and the Bucs are the only 2 teams to reach 25 points or 400 yards of offense against them. Like, they are an outstanding, exceptional, flawless defense that completely overwhelmed the Niners last time, and I don't have much reason to see it going differently this time. So when I do think about the Niners and how they could win this game, I look to the other side of the ball, and I think they need to find a way to induce a poor Seattle offensive game, because that offense does have its flaws. How do you see that side of the matchup fare?
I'm focusing on 2 aspects of the Seattle offense. Again, shutting down the running attack, which I think has been the weak point for Seattle. They are a high-volume rushing attack, but they don't rush it very effectively. So I'm looking to shut down Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, force them to be very one-dimensional, get into these passing downs, these very predictable passing downs. And then after that, I'm selling out on Jackson Smith and Jigba. I am going to bracket him. I'm going to double-team him all game. I am looking at ways that I can just isolate him. And again, all this is easier said than done, but if there's somebody that's going to be able to gimmick up a defense and make it happen, I do believe it's Robert Saleh. He is one of the best defensive coordinators in football. And by way of doing this, you're just going to force Sam Darnold to have the ball in his hands more, and I think that's your way of creating an advantage for yourself, forcing them into throwing downs, trying to get Darnold to put the ball in harm's way and force passes and put the ball into his hands. I've been critical of Darnold all year. I think it's been another encouraging season for him. Obviously, we all know the stat. He is the only quarterback in back-to-back seasons to win, 14 games or 12 games with two different franchises. Darnold's been elite. And he's a really good quarterback, but if you can force him into some of these predictable passing downs, get him under pressure, he can force and cough up a couple of turnovers. And again, when you were the underdog in this matchup, when you were on the road in a tough place to play like Seattle, I think that's the recipe. Make Seattle one-dimensional, sell out on JSN, get pressure on Darnold, and force him to cough up a couple of turnovers. That being said, too, interrelated with that, I think it is vitally important that San Francisco doesn't have these debilitating three-and-out kind of drives. San Francisco's defense was great last week against Philadelphia in getting them off the field, 3-and-out, 4-and-out. That's why they were able to kind of sustain and win, even though their offense wasn't moving the ball. I think if their offense is this bad against Seattle, I don't think you can have those kind of drives. You can't have your defense getting tired out against Seattle. But more importantly, I just want the ball in Seattle's hands as little as possible. I want San Francisco to dominate the time of possession battle and give Darnold and JSN as few possessions and as limited time on the field as possible. So, again, man, I just think Seattle is working at such a talent advantage that San Francisco is going to have to shrink the margins as much as possible. Yeah. And that's by having these long drives and maybe not even converting. Obviously, you want to get points every single drive. Not even maybe converting into points as many times, but converting third downs, keeping long drives, keeping the ball out of Seattle's hands offensively, and then again, getting them into some of these predictable drives and forcing 1 to 2 turnovers. Again, man, I think it's possible. I am not just ready to write off and count out San Francisco out of this football game. I just can't with what they've done with his coaching staff. And I've harped on this before. You know it as well as I do, Carson. Anytime you get a third divisional game against an opponent, it's weird, it's wonky, and I just think we're in for a little bit more of a grimy, nasty kind of football game, man. These are fierce rivals. These two teams know each other like the back of their hands, and I think it's going to be really competitive. But the margins for San Francisco have shrunk, and I think they've got to convincingly win defensively in this one.
Yeah, and it is worth noting, we can talk a lot about the much more recent matchup, and I do think it's more relevant because it was 2 weeks ago instead of 5 months ago. But the Niners did beat Seattle in week 1, and they did that by holding them to 13 points and just getting 17 of their own. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can make Darnold uncomfortable. I think that's really the key here. Saleh's got to find some way to rattle him, but he's got to do it with this personnel that is so limited because this Niners defense already lost a lot of talent, and then they've just been decimated by injuries. He's got to do it with no pass rush. The Niners have had the worst pass rush in terms of pressure rate in the NFL since Bosa went down for the year, and really just with a bunch of no-names everywhere. I think a lot of that is going to fall on the linebackers. Eric Kendricks was huge for them last week in coverage, and can those linebackers keep the run game in check, as you're saying, to force Seattle into more of those third and long situations where there is more pressure on the pass game with their backs against the wall? I have a lot of respect for Saleh. I do think, though, personnel, it just becomes a reality at a certain point. And also, against the Eagles, the Niners have a profound coaching advantage, not just because they're brilliant, but because the Eagles have Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni, and I respect the hell out of Vic Fangio, but the other two are buffoons. Now you're going up against a team that, if San Francisco's the best coached, what is Seattle? The second best? The third best? Like, they are elite in terms of their coaching on both sides of the ball, too. So if you look at the last matchup, yes, Seattle only scored 13, but they really got what they wanted for the most part. And what's troubling for this Niners team is that Seattle ended the year running the ball the best they have all season. As you mentioned, going into like the last 3 games, I think they were 31st in rush yards per attempt. And we've talked about them running the ball a lot more so to set up their very efficient passing game out of a lot of those heavy personnel books and try to force teams to match personnel, and then they can cook some slower defensive groups. But recently, they've just been straight up running it well. Last 3 games, 171 rushing yards per game, over 5 yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns. They ran it extremely well versus the Rams, could be relevant down the line, and versus the Niners. So that's a big difference here, that the Seahawks offense has been able to get so much more going in the run game. And then the other problem San Francisco has to solve, obviously, is, as you mentioned, JSN, who cooked everybody all season, including Lenore. He was the most consistent receiver in football, and I agree with you. Defensive priority number 1 is do everything to take away JSN that you can, and that's probably not going to be, like, actually bracketing, right? Like, that's too extreme. But all of their zone coverages are going to be angled towards him, constantly having help on JSN, because outside of him, the Seattle wide receivers had 31 yards in the second meeting between these two teams. Everything else was JSN, running backs, and tight ends. So specifically, I think they cannot allow JSN to get an explosive that breaks this game open. He's been the best deep receiver in the NFL. Nobody's had more 40-plus yard catches.
Dude,
points are going to be so hard to come by that a play like that is so valuable for Seattle and so damaging for the Niners in this game.
I'm just selling out on him. Yeah, there's some explosivity in a guy like Rashid Shaheed behind him, but I'm selling out completely on JSN, man. For my money, he was the best receiver in football this year. Shout out Puka. He was excellent. He's been excellent, but I'm selling out on him in this game, dude. I completely agree. Points are going to be super hard to come by. You cannot let him break out, and if that means double teaming him, 90% of the game, if that means putting a guy on him and putting a safety on a deep zone on his side of the field every play and just shading him, like, I am completely selling out on JSN. I think he's the best player in this football game, man. And like you said, I completely agree. You cannot let him break this game wide open because we know how capable he is of doing something like that.
100%. And it is way easier said than done to keep him in check whatsoever, but that's going to have to be the top priority. And the reality is, as much as the Niners may be down personnel, Darnold can be rattled. His last 8 games, he's given you 223 yards per game, 7.2 yards per attempt. Okay there, but 83 passer rating, 8 touchdowns, 10 turnovers. That's not good, and that stands in stark contrast to his form from the first half of the year when he was dicing everybody up, and Seattle's offense has been much more average over those last 2 months, just 13th in yards per game. Specifically, Darnold ended the year 28th in EPA per dropback under pressure. So he's improved a lot. He can be induced to make mistakes under duress, but the concern for San Francisco is how do you manufacture that pressure? Because they have struggled to do that more than anybody else. Even against the Eagles, they had a 16% pressure rate. Like, they were not pressuring Hurts whatsoever. They were doing a lot of other stuff well defensively, but that Eagles offense is also so inept. Like, it's hard to have meaningful big picture takeaways and say, oh, this Niners defense is so improved, when the Niners defense really struggled against good offenses down the stretch, and then they were able to beat a terrible, horribly coached offense. I don't know that translates so much to this week. I think there is a personnel reality here where the Niners probably just don't have the guys to really bother this offense. If you look at the last meeting, Darnold is 8th in EPA per dropback when not pressured, and nobody gets less pressure than the Niners. So I give them a lot of credit for last week. I do think that was very damning for Philly, though. So I do think the Seattle offense will do enough against this decimated Niners defense, and really I just think the Seattle defense is going to dominate. I think that's their formula against anybody. It's defense dominate, offense do enough. I think it's pretty low scoring. I think it's gritty. I think it has the feel of a third divisional rivalry game of the year. I'm going to go 23-13 Seahawks.
Wow, that is low scoring. I'm going to go
Yeah.
25-20 Seahawks. If there is a guy for the Niners that could break this game open, that could force that kind of game-breaking turnover, I think it's Bryce Huff. I think it's going to be him. I would line him up opposite the other side of Charles Cross. I wouldn't put him along because Charles Cross has been elite this year. I'd put him on the other tackle and see if he could win one time and get that. If there's going to be a guy, I would say it's probably Bryce Huff for the Niners. He's kind of the only one who could really get home and create that kind of play. But yeah, if Kittle was out here, man, I might give San Francisco a little bit more of a shot to win this game. I think that's kind of the death knell for me in all this. I just think they are working at too much of a talent disadvantage. So this is a great year for San Francisco. Again, there's a chance, but I think the margins are really, really slim for them. So I am going to take Seattle to win this one.
It'll be interesting to see what the Niners try to do to get pressure because they're not a team that likes to blitz a lot. I think they had the 6th lowest blitz rate in the NFL this year. They blitzed a little bit more against Philly, but again, still not much, and the pass rush wasn't good in that game. They're never good. So for San Francisco, I agree with basically everything you laid out in terms of their formula. You need some Shanahan magic. You need him to be brilliant. You probably, or at least maybe, need a trick play to get points on the board for you. I do think Seattle's going to be incredibly well prepared for that. They're just so keyed in on everything. They're so damn well coached. And the other key that I look at is you need Brock to outplay Sam Darnold, flat out. And personally, I don't trust Brock more than Darnold. I think Darnold was better this year, and what's just as significant is the degree of difficulty in terms of the defenses they're facing is so vast. I think it would have to be a sound out-coaching and a sound out-playing at quarterback for San Francisco when I feel better marginally about Seattle at quarterback, and I feel their coaches are amazing too, and they just have much more talent. So I am going to take them to win by 10, and I would be pretty damn surprised if they lost. I'm not going to lie. I know you're saying you think there's a real chance. I respect San Francisco and their coaches so much, but I think this is where they run into their ceiling. Let's move on to the Sunday slate, Logan. Texans-Patriots. We got another elite defense, but this time the quarterback opposite them is the man who we argued for MVP this year, Logan. Drake Maye. That is the key matchup that stands out here first. Drake Maye versus this Houston defense. How do you see that going?
Definitely. That is the key matchup. Also, the New England offensive line just versus the Houston defensive line, I think, is huge to monitor. Patriots offensive line was one of the worst in football last year. They retooled this season. They got Will Campbell in there. But if you think back to last week, I mean, this is a revamped Patriots offensive line, but they struggled against a Chargers defensive line, which is not as nearly as dominant as the Houston Texans D-line. Drake Maye against the Chargers was sacked 5 times and was stripped twice versus them. He looked overwhelmed. He looked flustered. He looked uncomfortable. And that's something just to monitor, how comfortable is Drake Maye in the pocket? How much time does he have to throw? Because, it's not only this Patriots offensive line, it's how can these receivers create separation? You're talking about the elite strength of this Houston defense. It's the fact that they can win so quickly at the line of scrimmage against anybody offensively rushing for, but it's also the fact that they can button up on the back end. There is a real world in which Houston just decimates this Patriots offense. They just convincingly win one-on-one at every position, and there's nothing downfield. That is where I think Drake Maye's self-creation and legs are going to be huge in this game, in which Drake Maye may need a legacy game. And I'm just not even talking about statistically. I don't think this is going to be a ridiculous statistic game for Drake Maye. I think if Drake Maye can get close to 250 yards and 2 TDs, that may be just enough to eke this one out against Houston. I think they're going to win at the point of attack. I think Drake is going to have to be composed, get rid of the ball quickly. McDaniels may have to gimmick up this attack, and they may have to run some short screen passes, some passes underneath to supplement. Just get the ball out quickly. I think that the New England offense is going to have to gimmick it up a little bit, and I think Drake Maye is going to have to create with his legs in a special way to create plays against this Houston defense. I don't think it's going to be a defensive battle the way we saw against Pittsburgh, but I think you could see I think it's going to be definitely similar to the Patriots-Chargers game, where it could be a lot of 3-and-outs, a lot of punting, a lot of drives where you get 1 first down, 20 yards, and you're punting the ball back to the other team.
It's a defensive football vibe this weekend, man. That's what happens when you get the Texans and the Seahawks and the Broncos out there.
Definitely. And so I am really just looking at how the Patriots game plan for this attack, because I don't think you're going to have a lot of opportunity downfield for these playmakers. How much can they supplement the passing attack with some of these underneath screen games? Can they run the ball at all effectively with Henderson and Stevenson? And can Drake Maye create with his legs against this elite unit? Like, there was pressure on Drake Maye last week, and he was not elite. That pressure has been ratcheted up a ton. This is a completely different matchup, and I don't know, man. I think Drake's going to have to prove he can play MVP-level football against the best defense in the game, man. Look, dude, I'll just say it. Buffalo-Denver was the only game that I was, like, really convinced on. I'm at, like, 40 to 60, 45, 55 with all these three other – I don't know. I'm a little more like 65, 35, 70, 30 with this Rams-Bears game. But these two games in the middle here, Seattle, San Francisco, New England, Houston, I'm at damn near a coin toss.
That's interesting. I do think this one is the one that is closest for me on paper. And this is just going to be such a fascinating dynamic to watch play out. The MVP, in my opinion, versus the best defense, in my opinion, as amazing as Seattle is, and you could go either way. I do think Houston has just had more like suffocatingly dominant performances against elite quarterbacks, and the numbers they've put up in those matchups are just so ridiculous defensively, and they're coming off of now the best defensive playoff performance by EPA of the last decade. Now they were playing, cover your ears, Logan, the lowly Steelers, but as you said, they have the best combination of edge pass rush and cornerback play I've ever seen. They have the number 5 pass defense of the last 15 years by opponent success rate. By the way, shout out to Ben Solak for those of the last 15 years stats. I got that from a great article he wrote. But they are elite at every level. They are fast. They are physical. They pressure. They cover. They hit hard. They're completely dominant. But now they're up against the quarterback who was number 1 in EPA per dropback under pressure, number 1 in yards, and number 1 in touchdowns under pressure. So great under pressure, but he also gets pressured a lot, the second most in the NFL this year. And you mentioned how things looked versus the Chargers when he took 5 sacks and was stripped twice. His awareness just has to be better. Like, you can't put the ball in harm's way against the Texans defense that also just had multiple strip sacks of their own last week. But overall this year, Drake Maye took the 4th most sacks in the NFL. This Patriots offensive line could absolutely get eaten alive by the Texans pass rush, and that could ruin the game for them. Like, it's almost a certainty Maye is going to be pressured a lot in this game, but can they keep it on the right side of the line between a lot of pressure and game-ruining pressure? And then, obviously, how is Drake Maye going to handle it? Like, he's going to have the awareness to avoid the big mistake, which he didn't last week, and I think he's probably going to have to hit 1 or 2 deep shots in this game. You mentioned maybe trying to keep things underneath because you want to negate the amount of time that pass rush has to get home. I think we've seen, though, this Texans defense is so elite tackling. Like, they tend to be all over that shit. If there is one vulnerability they have, and it's a very slight vulnerability, but for all their dominant defensive numbers, they did allow an average amount of passes of 20-plus yards. I do think there will be a couple opportunities for downfield shots in this game, and Drake Maye's been the best downfield deep ball passer in the NFL. He's been accurate. He's been explosive as all hell. He's going to have to hit those 1 or 2 opportunities when they present themselves, whether that's the protection holding up for long enough in 1 or 2 spots, or if that is him scrambling, making something crazy happen out of structure. Clearly, we're going to have to see Drake Maye go superhero mode on several plays against this defense, particularly, though, bringing up his legs to scramble, Logan, like you did. I think that's a great shout, because the reality is, I mean, if you're getting pressured and everything's covered, at some point, he might just have to call his own number. This might be another game where he has to have 50-plus rushing yards. But however he does it, they need Drake Maye to create a few explosives against this defense, and he has done that better than anybody this year, because I just don't think you can nickel and dime your way down the field against Houston. And I think also the longer the drives have to go, the more of a chance there is that 1 sack blows everything up and they get a strip sack. Like, the chances for big plays will be absolutely essential for New England to convert on in this game. Overall, if you look at Houston's resume versus elite quarterbacks, I mean, they held Stafford and the Rams to 14 points, Allen and the Bills to 19 points, Mahomes and the Chiefs to 10 points, Herbert and the Chargers to 16 points. They left a couple on the board. But still, like, Houston, for the most part, when it has been that matchup of our dominant defense versus the best quarterbacks in the NFL, they've won. So I certainly do not expect Drake Maye to light this defense up. Like, he's not going to put up sparkling MVP numbers in this game. He could, I guess. That would be an incredible, incredible performance. But with his offensive line especially, I just think it's a really exceptionally difficult matchup. But I do think he can hit a couple key plays, and I think he can ultimately perform well enough considering he doesn't have to pour on points because of the faults that there are in Houston's offense on the other side of the ball. So let's look there, Logan. The major key on the other end. C.J. Stroud versus the Patriots defense. How do you see that matchup going?
My biggest question about the Houston offense is really just about the availability of Nico Collins. I mean, if Nico doesn't play in this game, well, really, I think it's a matchup between Nico Collins and Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Both of those are important players to monitor in terms of availability. Both are questionable coming into this game. If one of those guys is available and the other isn't, I think that's going to change who I pick in this game. So I'm taking the Patriots tentatively now, mostly because I expect Nico to not play and Gonzo to play. Yeah, that's a big difference to me. Neither of those guys play. I think I'm still leaning New England just because of my faith in Drake to create without that number one guy. I've got a little bit more faith in him than CJ, and then I think I'm going to go with the Patriots if both or if neither of them play. But those are important injuries to monitor. I don't know what to make of CJ, man. I like CJ. I'm normally really confident in his ability to make throws downfield, to stay calm under pressure. That's one of my favorite things about him. But he looked flustered against Pittsburgh, and I actually think New England's defense is a little bit better than Pittsburgh's in terms of personnel. Maybe not the D-line individually, but I think overall I do prefer this New England defense. Milton Williams being back is a big deal to me at the point of attack. And, Houston hasn't been able to run the ball effectively. They do at the end of the game against Pittsburgh. I don't know, man. The Nico Collins injury is the biggest thing to me because they are so dependent on him being available for them to move the ball. And without him, then you're looking to like a Jaden Higgins, a Christian Kirk, Noel to move the ball, a Dalton Schultz. I just think it exacerbates an already kind of stressed out Houston offense, man. It's already C.J. Stroud versus the world, and if Nico's not going to be out there, I think I would pretty confidently take the Patriots. That's really the thing to monitor to me with this offense. And can CJ keep his cool? I think it's advantage New England for me, man. I'd say Houston's probably a below average offense, one of the bottom 16 units in football this year.
100%, dude. I mean, we can go to my favorite numbers. They're 27th in yards per drive, 21st in points per drive. Like, just flat out in terms of offensive production, they have been below average this year, clearly, and they are horrible in terms of finishing drives and turning them into touchdowns instead of field goals, as we talked about. They're 30th in red zone percentage. And CJ is coming off of his worst game of the season. Like, he had a couple nice throws downfield against Pittsburgh, but he was out of sorts. He was inaccurate on some important throws that were there. He lost 2 fumbles. He had an interception. He dropped 3 snaps. He has to be much better for Houston to win this one, obviously. So then the question is, can he be much better? And what's New England going to throw at him? And how much can they expose this Texans offensive line? Because the Texans offensive line is bad. It's not Chargers horrible, but it is a bad group overall. I would expect New England to dial up the blitzes like they did last week. The Patriots are 5th in pressure rate when they blitz, and they're 16th when they don't. And they're 26th in sack percentage when they don't blitz. So the difference in terms of the pressure they're able to generate is massive. I thought they were cooking with some of the blitzes they were sending last week. And if you look at that game, their pressure rate was average when they didn't blitz against the Chargers, but they had the second most pressures of anybody last week when blitzing. CJ hasn't been great versus the blitz this year. 19th in EPA per dropback, under those circumstances. Last year, he was 24th in EPA per dropback versus the blitz. Even his rookie year, when he had his best season overall, he struggled more versus the blitz. He's just never really performed well versus the blitz. So I would bring the heat. I would be looking to overwhelm that offensive line. Trust your guys to cover on the back end. See if you can force CJ into a mistake or two, because CJ has made multiple mistakes in 2 of the last 3 games. This is a big game for him, just because I think his reputation has slowly gotten worse, and I have mostly attributed some of his numbers being just okay to the fact that he does have to try to carry so much in this really tough offensive situation. But again, 2 of the last 3 games, he's looked very shaky out there against good defenses, and this Patriots secondary is legitimately quite good. Then that does bring up the question, as you mentioned, of if Gonzalez is going to play. I think that's a major key in this game, him and Nico both, and I agree with you completely. If they both play, or if neither of them play, I think it cancels out, but I think it is more likely right now that Gonzalez does play, because Vrabel said he expects him to be out there. Nico suffered a seemingly more severe concussion just because he was carted off. It was his second of the season, which is bad, and it happened a day earlier than Gonzalez's. So for all those reasons, I just think he's less likely to be out there. And if Nico's out, that's 29% of Houston's receiving production out the door. And specifically, it's so much of their explosiveness. Houston, one thing they did well this year, big explosive completions. They had the 3rd most completions of 40-plus yards, 11, the deep passing game. 5 of those 11 went to Nico. That was the 2nd most in the NFL. They had 47 completions of 20-plus yards. 18 of those went to Nico, 8th in the NFL. So I'm worried he's not going to play. Even with him, this offense was bad overall this year, and so I'd imagine we're going to see them struggle on that side of the ball again. Stephen A. has his thoughts on Kirk and what he's capable of, but I don't know, man. I don't think he's replicating the performance he had last week, and I just don't trust the totality of this offense.
We know what kind of content Stephen A.'s been consuming,
Certainly.
man.
Oh, certainly, yeah. Look, genuinely. But in terms of other keys, I think the turnover battle is extra key in this one. You can say it about any football game, but Houston was plus 17 in turnover margin this regular season. They were top 3 in preventing and forcing turnovers. So I think this game could easily swing on them taking back a strip sack, right? Drake May cocks it back at the inopportune time. The pass rush is all over him, and boom, that's the exact play they need to get some points on the board, because Houston's offense is limited. And they could survive with that formula with CJ not shooting them in the foot. But CJ tried to shoot them in the foot several times last week. It didn't matter because their defense was that good and the Steelers' offense was that bad. And then I also do look at the run game for both sides, because as you mentioned, the Texans were 22nd in rushing yards this year, 29th in rushing yards per attempt. They were a bad run game. They've always been a bad run game in the entire time CJ's been there, but they did just have their best game of the year on the ground versus Pittsburgh. So is that sustainable? My inclination is no, especially because Milton Williams has been such a game changer for this Patriots run defense. When he's on the field, they allow just 83 rushing yards per game. That's an elite number. Without him on the field, they were allowing 147 yards per game, so almost double the rushing production allowed. And I will say, with Milton Williams on the field, they haven't faced many good rushing attacks, which is what's keeping that number so low. But the Texans aren't a good rushing attack, and I don't see them getting much production on the ground. I think it's advantage New England in that matchup. And I think if we look at the run games compared to one another, the Patriots' run game really came alive down the stretch. They had over 156 rushing yards per game over the last 7. Travion Henderson is the most explosive running back in this game. Houston's run defense is stout, so I'm still not expecting much from New England on the ground. I just like their chances to get something going there more than Houston's, but I do think ultimately it's going to be a lot on both these quarterbacks. It's going to be a lot on both these passing attacks under pressure, and that's probably going to be the key dynamic in this game. Can the Texans defense be so disruptive that CJ, comparatively to Drake, is able to just produce a little more in the passing game in a more comfortable matchup against a less imposing defense? Ultimately, right now, I don't trust CJ enough to pick Houston to pull off the upset.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And on the rushing point for Houston, yeah, they were 29th in yards per attempt. We know that Nick Chubb doesn't really have that kind of explosiveness that he used to, and Jawar Jordan is questionable for this game, and so
Woody Marks was eating last week. He was playing really well.
Garbage time.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh,
all right.
Pittsburgh tax.
All right, yeah, fair enough. Look, I agree with you. They're not a good rushing attack. But it's certainly not going to be Nick Chubb who gets it going for them, if anybody does.
That is ultimately where I land, though. I'm taking the Patriots 22-19. I think Maye is more special than Stroud in this game. I think the Patriots have the slightly better playmakers in this game than the Texans, and I think the Pats are just the more complete team. So I am going to take them to advance to the AFC title game.
Yeah, you can totally see it going either way because the Texans' defense is so dominant, but the offense is deeply flawed. CJ's just been a little too shaky. He can do it if he plays his best and if Drake plays below his standard in this really tough matchup, but I can't pick it because I do trust Drake Maye a ton. Again, it's not that he's going to light up this defense because nobody lights up this defense, but make enough plays, win a lower scoring, elevate your supporting cast, 20-17 kind of battle, and that is actually my exact prediction. I'm going to take New England to win 20-17. So another kind of a gritty game. What's your exact score prediction here?
I'm going to take the Pats 22-19.
Oh, I love it. Even weirder. Guys, I have a humiliating confession to make. I recently discovered that I was paying for 2 HBO Max accounts, or HBO or Max. I can't remember what it's called now. It's one of the 3. And how did I discover that? Rocket Money.
Carson just had to make sure he could watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. Me, I have it on DVD.
But what is Rocket Money? How did it help me pull off this miracle? Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings.
Rocket Money shows you all your expenses in one place, including subscriptions you may have forgotten about. If you see a subscription you no longer want, Rocket Money will help you cancel it. Their dashboard also lays out your total financial picture, including bill due dates and paydays, in a way that's easy to digest. You can even automatically create custom budgets based on your past spending.
Rocket Money has saved users over $2.5 billion, including over $880 million in canceled subscriptions alone. And I am one of the lucky many there, and I can still watch Curb Your Enthusiasm because it turns out you only have to have one HBO account to do that. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/nerdsesh.
That's rocketmoney.com/nerdsesh. rocketmoney.com/nerdsesh.
All right, let's get to the last game on the slate. Rams, Bears, Logan. We've got the 5-seed Rams traveling to Chicago, but they are the favorite, certainly on paper and in my mind. Let's look first at that Rams offense, the most efficient offense in football this year. How can Chicago's defense fare against that elite group?
Not turn the ball over, I think, is the biggest thing. Chicago has gotten a lot more healthy as the season has gone along. They will be without TJ Edwards. He was put on IR, so I think that's important to mention. They are going to be down a starting linebacker, pretty imperative guy for them. Teams have been able to move the ball on Chicago. I think as long as Stafford avoids a catastrophic mistake, they should be fine. I think they're going to be able to move the ball with relative ease. If it's Kyron Williams, if it's Blake Corum, I would say stick to your principles. Keep a balanced attack. Mash with Corum, mash with Williams when you can. Stafford, don't turn the rock over. Don't force balls. I think the Rams have a pretty clear talent advantage when it comes to Chicago on the outside. Having Puka and Devontae Adams, they should feast against them. Is Chicago going to be able to make that big play is my question. That's what they've been relying on all season long. Against Green Bay, they just came up clutch. They just had their backs against the wall, and they just answered every step of the way. That hasn't been their recipe. Their recipe has been, we force 2 to 3 turnovers. We convert off of those turnovers. So, honestly, I don't know. Go to church, pray, hope that Stafford gifts you 1 or 2. I would just say, I think Chicago's advantage on defense is going to be getting pressure. I don't know if they can really stop them on down to down. I think it's going to be being good situationally, winning on third down and red zone like it is in any game, forcing those turnovers and getting Stafford under pressure. Because if you're going to look at Matt Stafford in one limitation that he does have at this point in his career, it is the lack of mobility. And so really the only way I can see Chicago imposing their will defensively on this Rams offense is getting that pressure on Stafford in the pocket, sacking him, forcing him to cough up a bad throw or two, which we know he is capable of, and getting a turnover. But I don't know, man. I don't really look at any personnel group for Chicago and go, wow, they're going to be able to win on a down-to-down basis. I think it's more important for Chicago to not dig themselves a big hole the way we have kind of grown accustomed to throughout this season. I think that's much more important for Chicago than anything they're going to be doing down-to-down. I just think when I look at Chicago's defense versus the Rams' offense, I don't really look at any advantage that Chicago has.
No, it's a huge mismatch. It's sort of a David versus Goliath dynamic, which is why I think the Bears need to have that mindset of the gambler who's basically got nothing to lose. I mean, they're totally outmatched, so be aggressive. Like, I think they should blitz a lot because last week, that's how they saved their season. Their pressure rate doubled when they blitzed against Green Bay, and it actually got them off the field some in the second half, which they were incapable of doing in the first half. They have to find some way to manufacture pressure because their pass rush sucks. They were 27th in pressure rate this year, and if they try to just rush 4 against this offensive line, which is elite, and if they just let Stafford sit back there in clean pockets where he's elite, the game is over. Like, you might as well just call it at that point, or at least the defense is going to allow a fuck ton of points if that happens. I think they're going to allow a lot of points no matter what, but the defense is too bad and this Rams offense is too good to not be aggressive. If you blitz, realistically, receivers probably get open quickly. Stafford probably picks you apart anyways because the Rams offense is just that good and the Bears defense is just that flawed. But you need to try to get pressure. That has to be far and away your number one defensive priority because, as you mentioned, that's the one vulnerability for Stafford. He started last game 0 of 7 under pressure with a sack in an interception. He does not have that ability to move, to create out a structure. So if you can get home, that's kind of your only way to, maybe generate a big play defensively or get off the field to begin with. That would be my strategy. Blitz a lot and try to force Stafford to make throws outside the numbers where he also struggled last week. But the reality is the Bears defense, bottom 5 in yards allowed per pass and per rush this season. Like, I just think the Rams have so many paths to success. They should find a lot of success just pounding it on the ground. And if they want to go out there in 13 personnel, which they've used more than anybody else, those 3 tight end looks, and bully them on the ground with the extra blockers and set up the play action, I think that would be very effective in this matchup and maybe reduce the risk a little bit more of them bringing a lot of blitzes and getting some pressure. But I think the receivers will eat against this secondary. Chicago allowed the second most explosive passes this season. I do feel like this is the same story as last week, really. Against the Carolina defenses of the world and the Chicago defenses, the Rams can pretty much get it however they want offensively. They're that stacked. They're that well coached. They're that talented. They're that complete. Last week, they played a subpar game by their standards, and they still dropped 34. So I would be shocked, honestly, if the Rams don't put up major points in this game, which is why, as much as we can say, what should Chicago do defensively, I really think the question here is, can the Bears keep up in a shootout? And if so, how do they do that on the offensive side?
I definitely think they can hang with them in a shootout, and I look at a couple of key areas. The biggest advantage that I think the Bears have in this football game is their wide receivers versus the Rams secondary.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think Chicago's going to have basically nearly flawless execution offensively to stay in this game. You can't dig yourself one of these big-time holes because I think if you do, the Rams are just going to run the ball over and over again. They're going to bleed the clock. They're going to convert points. Like, that's just not a game script that the Bears are going to win. They need to answer with points. They need to score on basically every time down the field. I think they have an advantage against this Rams secondary. That's where we saw the Rams get attacked last week against Carolina, and the Bears have talented receivers. If it's Adunze, if it's Luther Burden, if it's Colston Loveland, if it's DJ Moore, right? Like, the Bears have guys, and against a Quentin Lake who just came back, against a Cam Curl who I think is vulnerable in man coverage, against an Emmanuel Forbes who is just a little body, like, I think the Bears have advantages there. And so you don't want to become just one-dimensional. They're a good rushing attack with Monungai. And, these are 2 elite offenses. Like, you want to keep a balanced attack, but I think they have an advantage in the receiving game. The next area that I'm looking is the offensive line against the Rams D-line. I think these are 2 elite position groups for both of these teams. The Rams get a ton of pressure. The Bears are one of the best offensive lines in football. That's another key area to watch. But beyond everything else, I think this is going to be on the shoulders of Caleb Williams. And I hate just putting it on the quarterback, but he is the biggest X factor to me in this game. He has got superhuman talent and superhuman ability. How much and how consistently is he going to tap into that? That's the big question to me. When I'm talking about the Bears digging themselves a hole, the two areas where they could get dog-walked early in this game and the Rams just walk all over them is the Bears get marched on defensively, and then Caleb comes out and he is generally inaccurate and inconsistent and flustered from the beginning of this football game. That is very much on the table. The Bears could have a couple of 3-and-outs and be out of this game down 14-0 very early in this game if Caleb isn't nails. But Caleb has the talent to be nails. He has got the legs to create against an elite pass rush and create even when he is under pressure and the Bears offensive line is getting beat, creating those superhuman throws downfield that only him or Mahomes or Josh Allen or the Lamars of the world, the Herberts, that they can make. He has got that kind of talent. But again, I think it's going to be more due to how accurate is he on early downs? How often is he hitting guys within structure and making plays? That to me is much more important for the Bears than him making these superhuman throws. He's got to be consistent and he's got to get ahead of the sticks. And the Bears have got to capitalize on as many drives as possible. So there are real advantages that I think the Bears offense has, specifically the wideouts versus the Rams defensive backs. But I'm looking at Caleb. Caleb to me is the X factor for the Bears. And again, I think early drives are going to be important. They can't dig themselves a hole the way they did against Green Bay, or they are going to lose this game. So that's what I'm looking at for Chicago. I think this is an explosive one, though. When we were looking at these defensive matchups in the other ones, I think this is a very high-scoring game. I think we are going to close in on close to 60 total points between these two teams, maybe even more. And, again, the biggest X factor in this game to me is Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree that the in-structure stuff is going to be more important for him than the out-of-structure. Can he make a couple of absolutely insane, just top-tier athlete, oh my God, kind of throws? I think he's got to do both. I think Caleb has to be really great in this game is the reality, just because I think the Chicago offense has to be really great. I think they got to put up a lot of points if they want to win, and I agree with you when it comes to the opportunities to attack this Rams defense, which is flawed. As we saw down the stretch of the season, as we saw last week, their run defense has had some real issues in the second half of the season. They're just 19th in yards allowed per rush overall, and the Bears are an elite rushing attack. They're third in rushing yards and yards per attempt this season. So very productive, very efficient. I think Chicago should come out looking to run it down their throats on early downs because they have an advantage there. They are a great run game against a very flawed run defense. And also, that keeps the Bears out of third and long. And that is where this Rams defense excels. That is where their pass rush is fully empowered to do their thing. That's the strength of this defense, that pass rush. They're number one in pressure rate on third and long. They have the third best EPA per play in third and long defensively, and they're seventh in third down percentage overall. So that's the one spot you want to stay out of against this Rams defense, and I think running on early downs gives you the best chance to do that. And then it is going to come down to some special Caleb plays and their ability to exploit this secondary. I agree with you. The Bears have an advantage. I think this Rams secondary is clearly flawed. We saw it last week. The Bears are going to attack. They're going to push the ball downfield. That's one thing. This is an aggressive passing game when they do throw the ball, and they can do it. They have an advantage with their receivers against this secondary. I'm not confident in the Rams' ability to cover Loveland and Burden and Rome and Moore right now. These guys are really good. Caleb's got to hit on a relatively high percentage of the throws that are there, the intermediate stuff, the more routine stuff. And then if they are going to win this game, because I know maybe people are mad, maybe people think I'm doubting the Bears. I do view them as significant underdogs here. So I think it's going to take a little magic, probably on multiple fronts, and part of that is Caleb pulling off another one of those 4th and 8 level plays. It doesn't have to be maybe that insane. That was one of the craziest plays I've ever seen, but like a couple of those moments of pure special athleticism where he just pulls something out of the hat that is incredible, that is a signature. Yeah, that is why Caleb Williams has so much potential and can do things that so few players can do. That second half versus Green Bay was electric, man. Like, he really started hitting on some of those big-time plays. And it's not impossible for me to see the Bears hitting on like 2 50-yard pass plays in this game and running for 5.5 yards per carry. Like, I think they'll put up points. I think that they could definitely have a big offensive day, but then when I zoom out, I do think the reality is they may be going against a flawed defense, but it's still a significantly better defense than their own. And the Bears may be a good offense, and they are, but they're still going up against a significantly better offense because the Rams are the best offense in football, and the Bears have had some inconsistencies in the passing game and some slow starts. I just think the Rams are clearly the better football team. So maybe, just maybe, the Bears can summon some more of that magic, that holy magic, and it's going to come down to, again, a special Caleb play or a couple, just him exploiting this defense to the utmost potential overall. That plus 22 turnover margin the Bears had in the regular season, best in the NFL. They need that to go their way in this one. I think they need the cold weather to be like an actual factor. Some people have pointed out, great stat, since 2000, dome teams playing outside in the playoffs in below freezing weather, 2-15. It is going to be cold as hell in Chicago. Personally, I don't know that matters to me just because I think Stafford is so comfortable playing in that weather. But I don't know. That stat is at the very least interesting. The Pope is on their side. Clearly, Chi-Town boy, God is on their side. So those are the kind of things that Chicago needs to take advantage of. I'm just more confident in the Rams as a football team. I picked them to win the Super Bowl. I will go 38-27 LA in this one. I think we see fireworks. I think we see a lot of points.
I think we see fireworks too. I think the Bears keep it a little bit closer. I have them scoring 27 points as well, though. I'm going Rams 31-27.
Ooh, that'd be very fun. That'd be very fun. If you let the Bears keep it that close, man, who knows? The Bears, they're something else. All right, there you have it. I can't wait for this slate of games, dude. I am just so locked in. I don't think I've ever been this excited for an NFL postseason, truly. And that was how I felt going into Wild Card Weekend, which was then the best Wild Card Weekend ever. And that's how I feel going into the Divisional Round, even though I probably am not expecting as many games to go down to the wire. You know, I picked a couple double-digit games here. Who knows? It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of interesting, contrasting styles. Can't wait to see it. But before we get out of here, Logan, we have to talk about this news. Mike Tomlin stepping down as Steelers head coach. It was just a couple days ago that we talked for about an hour about how you had sort of resigned yourself to hopelessness and that you just thought it was the case that the Steelers were going to remain in this state of eternal mediocrity, that they would not make the changes that they needed to make as an organization, that Mike Tomlin was not going anywhere. And now Mike Tomlin is gone. Of course, as we did say, when this was eventually going to happen, it was not going to be Tomlin being fired. The Steelers wouldn't do that to him. It is officially him stepping down, but you assume some sort of mutual parting of ways here. Regardless, he's out the door. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some Steeler fans try to completely rewrite the book on Tomlin and say that he's not a Hall of Famer or something like that. Mike Tomlin is a Hall of Famer. Again, I think you look at his track record, especially post-Big Ben. I think he bolstered his resume. You know, people try to say and just boil it down to the playoff games. How many fucking NFL coaches in NFL history do you know that could take the likes of Russell Wilson and Mason Rudolph and Mitch Trubisky and Duck Hodges and 40-something-year-old Aaron Rodgers and make the playoffs?
I think anybody who looks at the fact that they had 5 straight double-digit playoff losses, which is unacceptable, of course, and the longest such streak in NFL history. But if you put that on Mike Tomlin getting out-coached in the playoffs, you're just misunderstanding the problem. The problem is that Tomlin elevates them to a certain point in the regular season that doesn't translate to the playoffs because they are at such a talent deficit, because he can win 9-10 games with offenses and quarterback play that nobody else can do that with. But eventually you're going to go up against a team that is just way better than you. You're going to go up against the Ravens with Lamar or the Chiefs with Mahomes or the Bills with Josh Allen or this year a historic Texans defense. It's not a coaching thing. It's more so his coaching, his competence, and the overall mentality of the Steelers of always wanting to be competitive has destined them to this place where the floor is so high, but the ceiling is so damn low that you know what you're going to get every year, and it sucks.
Yeah, and you run into a talent deficit that you just can't overcome. Teams are just better. Offenses are just better. Quite frankly, you've just never had the offense in the Mike Tomlin era. And because of this, Mike Tomlin always leaves you in a spot where you don't have a high draft pick, so you can't get some of the elite talent on in the draft. But and you know, it stresses you out because you have to hit on these draft picks in the later bits of rounds every single time. This is the right decision. The Steelers clearly need a new direction. And honestly, when I look at the future of the AFC and the future of the NFL, I think this is the perfect time to pick it. This to me is like choosing to bottom out in the late 80s, early 90s when you would be running into John Elway or Steve Young or Joe Montana or Dan Marino or we are so quarterback dense at this stage in the NFL, and we are so far away from having that guy at the quarterback position. I like it. We are punting to a different timeline. So I'm hype. Over the next 5 years, the Steelers probably aren't going to make the playoffs that much. I don't know. We'll see. Football changes so drastically year to year, but for the foreseeable future, in the crowded contender class of Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence in the Jaguars, Bo Nix in the Broncos, like a cutthroat AFC, a loaded NFC, Justin Herbert, like we're not going to be in there. I'm fine. I'm fine because we're not going to go and compete for a Super Bowl no matter what. The Steelers should make the judgment call. I really hope that they are not pivoting to a different contender timeline with a new coach. Yeah. I hope this is a signal that they are going to move off some of these older guys. I mentioned this in a TikTok on social media, but you're going to trade away some of these older contracts. Basically, all the older guys, 28 or older. I'm talking TJ Watt, Jalen Ramsey, Alex Highsmith, DK Metcalf. All of these guys who are older, who are going to regress over the next couple of years that want to compete for championships. Hopefully they move off of them and send them to contenders. I hope TJ Watt gets traded to the Buffalo Bills and he can tick off the one spot that they need. And you can understand how special of a pass rusher TJ Watt is even at 31 years old because he's wearing blue and red instead of black and yellow.
Hey, what are the implications here? Just because I think Myles Garrett is better than him.
No. Carson, I know how you've talked about TJ Watt over the past 5 years.
How I've talked about him, all I've said is Myles Garrett's better than him.
Consistently, even though he was definitively better a couple of years ago, you still wanted to,
well, he wasn't definitively better.
He was. He broke the single-season sack record, and you didn't want to give him props then. I digress.
He's always been, a great sack generator, great at forcing fumbles for sure. I still think Myles Garrett, even a couple years ago, was more destructive on a snap-to-snap basis.
He wasn't,
you consider
but
the
that's
pressure
okay.
and the double team rate and all that.
But he'll go and be a Buffalo Bill, and then you'll understand his greatness.
I promise you, I have nothing against TJ Watt, and I think he's great.
Okay. I know the digs. I know what you think about him. But
okay, we could go in circles, I guess. I don't know why I would have something against TJ Watt. I think his brother's got one of the 5 highest defensive peaks ever. But anyway, sorry, go ahead. You're going through a lot. I get it.
So does TJ.
Are going through a lot too.
Basically, we are blowing everything up. We are restarting, and that is the right decision. I don't know how you can feel anything else about the Steelers. But that's the one thing I want to hammer home. The one narrative that I'm seeing kind of being spawned out of all this is that people are trying to denigrate Mike Tomlin for being successful in spite of his offensive situation. And I think it's the dumbest narrative that I've seen on social media. The guy's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest coaches in NFL history. And it has just run its course naturally. And so whether the next step is Coach T on TV, I think he'll be excellent. I think he'll be one of the best guys on television. If he is coaching somewhere else next season, if it's the Giants, if it's the Raiders, wherever, he'll be a great coach in that spot because Coach T is an elevator of men and a leader of men. So I wish him nothing but the best. He's a Hall of Famer. And I just want to reiterate that. Coach T's a legend, and nobody's going to disrespect Coach T because he's the man. But yes, this gives us a new direction, and I'm tempering expectations, obviously, but I have something to look forward to in a couple years from now where hopefully we can rebuild and create a new ceiling. Carson and I always talk about ceiling versus floor dynamics. The reality for the Steelers is in the post-Big Ben era, their floor has been exceptionally high, but their ceiling has been exceptionally low. Now in this new era, their floor is going to be lower, but hopefully this opens up a new ceiling that we can break through to win a playoff game, to reach a conference title game, to get back to the Super Bowl, which is what fans want. They have just grown tired of mediocrity and toiling away in the wild card, and I'm excited about the prospect of a new beginning and a new era of Steelers football.
As you should be, man. Things had to change. That was abundantly clear. I do want to give Tomlin his credit, though, because I do think he's a great coach, and I do think he got the most out of a lot of these rosters. And the fact that he went 19 years without a losing season is absolutely a testament to what he excels at as a coach when it comes to winning games that you shouldn't win with special teams execution and defense, and the fact that the Steelers have been in the playoffs multiple times with a negative point differential. Like, all that stuff is impressive. But again, you reach a point where you can acknowledge, man, he is really good at doing that, and yet that is not what we need. That is not what is meaningful for us, satisfying for us in terms of the heights we want to reach as a football team. And like you said, that actually prevents us from reaching those heights because we aren't picking high, because we aren't taking chances offensively. They haven't had the personnel. Like the fact that they have been able to maintain that streak since 2019 with the quarterback play they've gotten over those years. If it was Duck Hodges, Mason Rudolph, old washed Big Ben, into the Kenny Pickett era, Mitch Trubisky, even Aaron Rodgers now, like Russell Wilson, of course, last year, Justin Fields. It's crazy the fact that they have been a winning football team over that period. And since 2019, the Steelers rank 29th in yards per game, man, and 23rd in points per game. So they've just been so limited on that side of the ball for so long. You know you're not going anywhere serious. You're in like this constant state of fake competitiveness where you can scrape your way to 9-10 wins and you are never going to win a playoff game. And that much is clear on paper before kickoff even happens. So I think the hope is that this is reflective of an actual change in philosophy for the Steelers. The nightmare scenario to me is if they look at this and they say it's going to be a new face, but the same messaging, the same philosophy, because that would just be a disaster if you're going to have that mentality of, oh, let's squeeze every last drop we can and be defensive-minded and win 9-10 games.
Well,
nobody's better at that than Mike Tomlin.
I don't necessarily agree in the sense that I'm okay if we get a defensive-minded coach like a Chris Shula or a Brian Flores. My issue is more going to be how we allocate those other resources like contracts and salary cap. This was the most expensive defense in football this past season, and I think when you look at a Rams team, I would much rather construct a roster like that where I have invested heavily on my offense, and that's where most of my money is divvied up into, and I have a very young defense that I'm trying to maximize through coaching. I think that's where I would be frustrated in terms of that philosophy talk.
Totally agree. Really well said. My point is not at all that I don't want the Steelers to go out there and get a defensive head coach. My point is they have to realize the importance of offense at every level in terms of personnel and in terms of coaching. So if it is Brian Flores, I think he's a hell of a defensive coach and obviously had his year with Pittsburgh, but it needs to be somebody who's going to be able to hire a good offensive staff, right? Because you don't want it to be another version of going from Matt Canada to Arthur Smith. Like you can't
Randy,
go through that again.
To Randy Sphincter, to Matt Canada, to fucking...
Yeah, dude, I mean...
Yeah, man.
You look at the offensive numbers since 2019, then you look at the fact that those three guys have been calling plays, and it's like, yeah, they all look like dinosaurs, man. Like, this is a league that offensively is run by the young man, whether you like it or not. Those are the guys who are creating stuff. Those are the guys who are coming out of the best coaching trees, and that's where they should look. So Flores has familiarity with a Kevin O'Connell, who's one of those great young offensive minds. Like, I would trust him more to make that hire than Tomlin, who I do think had more of an old-fashioned mindset when it came to that stuff. So that's going to be really interesting to see. Do they go with a defensive guy like Flores or Minter? I do wonder, considering how desperately they need to figure out the offense and how much they value stability. We say that. What's interesting is it's almost hard to draw conclusions about like the Steelers' hiring tendencies with coaches when you have three coaches in almost 60 years, right? So it's like, what do we actually know? Are they actually just this super stable organization where it's like, oh yeah, we'll give you a long leash, we believe in you? Or is it just they got three great coaches who all won quickly and like justified keeping their jobs for almost 2 decades? Do they want to go out there and hire young guys? Because with all three of them, they were 37 or younger when the Steelers hired them. Noel Cowher and Tomlin all. Is that division of like, we want a guy who's a career coach, or did it just work out really well 3 times? That's where I don't know exactly what they're looking for.
That's what's interesting is with Noel had run the Steelers, I won't say into the ground, but they had hung on to Chuck Noll, I think, for way too long. He should have stepped down in the early 80s to me when Terry Bradshaw went out. I think the Steelers, my dad always tells me about this, but he says the worst viewing years for him as a Steelers fan were the 80s because Terry Bradshaw hung on way too long. And if you remember in the it was 83 draft with Elway, is that 83 or 84?
Yep, that's 83.
In the 83 draft,
the
Pittsburgh Steelers pass on Dan Marino, who is in their back door, or in their backyard, in Pittsburgh. Bruh.
Okay.
And I believe they opted to draft defensive tackle Gabe Rivera, who passed away in a car accident, or was paralyzed in a car accident. and he barely played for Pittsburgh. They passed on Marino because Terry didn't want them to take a quarterback that year because he thought he had more in the tank. He gets injured. The team falls off. Terry falls off. They basically fucked the Steelers for all of the 80s because they held on to Noel and Bradshaw too long. They build the defense back up through the 80s, and when Cowher takes on, they're at least respectable. The thing about Cowher into Tomlin was Cowher had just won a Super Bowl with that team, and Tomlin absorbed a Super Bowl roster.
Yeah.
And then they built up the offense to an elite level. This is a really interesting scenario where the Steelers are kind of at their worst point ever when picking a new head coach. That's where I feel like it's unique in the sense that we're kind of going to really know the mettle of this head coach and how much he can elevate a subpar roster year one. Again, I don't know how much of this they are going to tear down. The Steelers are really unpredictable in this way because, like you said, we don't really have a track record of this team ever restarting or rebuilding.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, Carson. I think there is a real possibility that they may take a Flores or a Shula or a Minter, and they might not make any of these roster moves that I'm hypothesizing. There's a real chance that they look at this team and they go, well, okay, maybe we just, change out the head honcho and we run it back with TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and old-ass Jalen Ramsey. And I want to be clear about something. That's the biggest mistake that this team could make.
Totally.
And it is going to frustrate me even more as a fan because the firing of Tomlin signals to me that you are going to make a new direction change and we're going to restart. If you just take Tomlin out of the equation, I kind of sit back and I go, why did you even fire Tomlin? Because if we're going to run it back with the same roster, there's nobody that can elevate this roster better than Coach T. So I hope that this is a full restarting point. But like you mentioned, man, we don't really have any kind of backing or evidence to suggest that that is what Pittsburgh's going to do. That's
you
why,
would hope it is. You would hope that they understand the problem. You would hope they understand the reasons for frustration, right? Because, like you said, they have to get off the defensive money. They have to get younger, and they have to get the quarterback, dude. It's unserious to have the 7-year run of quarterback play they've had. And obviously, they held on until the last breath with Ben. But everything since then has been just so ridiculous how they have deprioritized the most important position by so far and just invested elsewhere and taken whatever they can get at quarterback. So yeah, it probably does take a year of bottoming out, getting one of those elite talents, and that can change everything so fast, especially if you bring in the right coach. How would you feel about Stefanski, Logan? Is he being discussed as a serious candidate? Because I just think when you look at what they should want, it makes a lot of sense to me because he's established as a head coach already. He's a 2-time coach of the year, right? He's done the job. And he's a great offensive mind. I just think they need to figure out offense so desperately. That would be my top priority. And I don't know. I like that option a lot. What do you think about that?
Again, when we look at the Steelers hiring in the past, Bill Cowher was hired as a defensive coordinator from Kansas City. Mike Tomlin was hired as a defensive coordinator from Minnesota. So, if we're basing this off their track record, I'm going to guess they're going to go with a defensive guy. That's just Pittsburgh's identity.
But how's that working out for him, man?
I don't want Stefanski. You're saying Stefanski's an offensive guy? To that, I would ask, what the fuck did Kevin Stefanski do last year with the Cleveland Browns that elevated Shadur Sanders?
He had the worst offensive personnel, arguably, in the NFL. He actually made Baker Mayfield look good. He actually ran a competent offense with Joe Flacco.
See, but that's when the Browns had one of the best offensive lines in football and an elite running game.
By 2023, and look, the offense wasn't good with Flacco, but it was
the
good
offensive
enough to
line
get them to
was
the playoffs.
I think the reason
back
the
in
Browns,
the Baker days, absolutely, the offensive line was
offensive
really good.
line was still really good with that Flacco team too. I think the offensive line has seriously regressed over the past 2 years, and their inability to run the ball between the tackles is why they've regressed so significantly. I don't think Stefanski's that good of an offensive coach. If I'm going to give him props, I'd say that him and Schwartz are better defensive minds. I don't want Stefanski. I don't think Stefanski elevated that offense whatsoever this past year. Shadur didn't look good. Dylan Gabriel didn't look good.
Not good.
And I don't want spoiled goods from my division rivals. I don't want Stefanski. I don't want Harbaugh either. I would rather stay away from division guys. If you had to give me my top, and I would love to hear your top 5 candidates for Pittsburgh too. My top 5 candidates, I would go number 1 is Brian Flores. Number 2 to me is Jesse Minter. Number 3 would be Shula. Look, maybe it's just like the comfort in the devil that I know versus the devil that I don't. I do like that defensive culture setter guy. I just think he's more – that's more of what the Steelers fan base is used to. But if we are going to go offensively, Kingsbury would be my first guy. Then I would go Clay Kubiak second, Clint Kubiak third. I would like to get a Shanahan principles kind of guy or a Kingsbury.
Wait, Kingsbury would be your first guy, really?
Look, man, I know that a lot of people don't like Cliff Kingsbury, and a lot of people are skeptical about him as a leader of men in the head coach position. In terms of an offensive builder, if you give Cliff Kingsbury an offensive line that is competent, that guy can create a run game that is going to maximize quarterbacks, and he's going to create a quick passing game. I know that people were disappointed with the Commanders this season. Look, dude, Jaden Daniels played like 3 or 4 games this year. He maximized Marcus Mariota. I know a lot of people were disappointed with the Commanders' record. I was super impressed with Kingsbury's ability to maximize offensive talent in Washington this year. The winning results may disappoint you. I like Kingsbury a lot.
I think he's pretty good as an OC. I don't know that he has the head coaching temperament, though, and all the traits that come with that. And I've just been more impressed by Clint Kubiak. I think what he's done in like totally different situations these last 2 years. The Saints offense was actually pretty good before Derek Carr died and then they fell off. But like he's creative. He's shown an ability to do it in multiple different ways.
They just haven't been able to run the ball. No,
but he creates a good run game. They haven't had good personnel. Well, Charbonnet isn't good. Kenneth Walker's good.
That's the one thing. I like his drop-back passing game. You saw it with Carr. You saw it with Darnold. They're really good at creating out of the play-action attack in single back, which is kind of a throwback. You really don't see guys line up in the way Kubiak has guys line up under single back. Now, they use the heavy sets. I like Kubiak. I'm going to be happy if we get any of these guys that I'm mentioning. If it's the top 3 defensive guys. I like the heavy sets, man.
Tight ends are back. And you guys have tight ends already.
We do. Arthur Smith damn sure couldn't figure it out.
And the run game was good with the Saints. And he certainly prioritizes it. My
thing is, I trust Kingsbury's ability to create more of a running game than I do Clint. And then Clay, with Clay, you just wonder.
All these guys' initials are KK.
With Clay, you just kind of wonder, is it more Shanahan or has he actually absorbed? Yeah. Because that was kind of the thing about some of these former offensive coordinators, right? Is it just the Shanahan, McCaffrey magic, or is this guy an elevator of offensive talent?
He's had a lot of time to absorb Shanahan, though. He's been there like 5 years.
Exactly. Right? And like, you think about, I didn't even mention it. The other guy that I would love to, I don't know if I'd like him as much. I would like Robert Saleh to be interviewed, and I'm intrigued about the prospect of maybe Robert Saleh coming over as the defensive guy for the Steelers. Yeah.
I don't want to say that if they hire a defensive coach, it's pointless because I don't think that's true. But again, they need to hire a defensive coach with a modern philosophy who knows how to prioritize offense. So to me, I'll say it like very Steelers to me that you're so focused on the defensive guys, and I'm like, I don't know if I love that.
I'll say it like this. I think the offensive coordinator hire is the most important hire of the process.
You don't get great offensive coordinators who don't become head coaches. That's the reality. So if you get a good defensive head coach who brings in a really good OC, that's good for now. And then they got to bring in another good OC and another good OC because defensive coordinators don't get swooped up like that. You have guys like Spags and Fangio who are like GOAT-level defensive minds, but brief stints as head coaches that failed. There are great defensive head coaches in the NFL right now. Like Mike McDonald is the one that stands out, but it is overwhelmingly offensive guys. So I guess my concern is just when you think about long-term who you're going to build around, an offensive guy feels like the safer bet because I worry if you just say, okay, you're our OC, well, then they get swooped up because that's what happens.
Just to clue people in, I want to give you guys some background on who the Steelers are at least looking at as prospective head coaching candidates for next season. 2 Rams coaches, Chris Shula, the defensive coordinator. His grandfather is Don Shula, the winningest head coach in NFL history. The Rams passing game coordinator, Nate Scheelhaus. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He is in his 2nd season as an assistant coach. They are requesting interviews with him as well. And then 3 other defensive-minded guys. Vikings defensive coordinator, who was a former Steelers head coach, Brian Flores. Chargers DC, Jesse Minter. And Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver. So we're very early on in the hiring process. The Steelers have yet to conduct interviews officially with any of these guys, but those are the
talked
first.
to Patullo yet. You got to get Patullo on the horn first.
Yeah, for sure, man. Those are the
Patullo and Greg Roman. Those would be my two first calls.
Man, let's get Sirianni in there, man. He's a great culture setter.
Well, he's going to keep his job forever because he's the best.
But those are the 5 guys that apparently we are looking at right now. Again, I like Flores a lot. I wanted the Steelers to promote him to defensive coordinator when Tomlin was in-house. I think Tomlin had too much of a heart to promote him. I think Tomlin is one of the most human coaches. Like, I think he liked Terrell Austin and he liked his guys and wanted them to prove it. But I think they're going to restart with the entirety of the coaching staff, and I really hope that Flores is the guy.
Flores is as good as a defensive mind as there is. So, like, if you're going to tell me you think he's the next Mike McDonald, like he's that additive defensively and culturally, like,
agreed.
I can believe that. So that one I would be good with. And Minter's really good too. So, like, look, those are 2 great defensive guys where I could be good with it. I do lean on the philosophy of prioritizing offense just because if you look at most of the best coaches in the NFL, especially the new hires, Ben Johnson,
the game is changing,
all
man.
These guys,
well,
right?
And
But like even some of the vets, McVay and Shanahan and Sean Payton, like most of the great coaches who we discuss in the NFL are offensive guys. LaFleur, although people have their problems with him, O'Connell, most of the top 10 coaches are offensive slanted. They're play callers.
100P. Also, though, that being said, if there are some guys who are available that don't get head coaching jobs, any of these guys I'm talking about, if Kingsbury doesn't get hired as a head coach, if Mike McDaniel doesn't get hired as a head coach, I would be interested.
He just feels like the least Steelers head coach ever,
right?
Though.
Oh, no.
I feel like
I
the
think
fan
people
base would just be like, no,
I agree.
No, thank you.
I think they would eat him alive. But if they don't get hired,
he'd be amazing.
Agreed. He would be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Logan,
I'm just
excited.
I'm
glad that you're relieved.
I'm just excited to restart, man. This is it's a new beginning, but I'm certainly tired of doing the same dance we've been doing for the past 10 years. So there's something new that I can look forward to, man. I'm actually excited about just some change coming, man. Something new.
You should be. Of course, a new beginning is wonderful. You have to actually execute on that. They have to actually do the right things, but clearly the first step here was acknowledging that there is a problem, and it's good to see that there was eventually a breaking point with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin. I didn't know if there ever would be. Shout out to Tomlin, great coach. Steelers still have his rights for another 2 years, so he's probably not going to coach in that time. If he does, it'll have to be a trade situation a la Sean Payton. That'll be interesting to monitor down the line, but for now, the Steelers are seemingly choosing a new direction, and Logan, that is a wonderful thing for you. I'm very excited considering not how grim the conversation was on Monday night, but just how many times we've had the same conversation, and it's good to see that now at least there is a light on the horizon, and there is a light on the horizon this weekend, baby, because we got all these great games that we previewed. Can't wait to react to them all Saturday night and Sunday night. We will be live on YouTube. We will see you guys then. Of course, all the shows will go up on audio right after that, so catch all that stuff wherever you prefer to. If you want to see our ugly mugs or not, you know where to find us. You can follow us on social media for all of our trivia content, graphics from the show, clips from the show. That's TikTok at NerdSesh, Instagram at NerdSesh, and Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. And if you want to chat with our community and just get your takes off over in our Discord, you could do so by joining that at the link in the link tree, which you can find across our social media bios. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. Can't wait to talk some more football with you all and see how this all goes. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.